Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto has an advanced bloodline limit like Hashirama part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. If one was out among the trees on this moonlit night, they would see a young blonde child running atop branches, jumping from one to another. While this isn't an unusual occurrence within this village, it is strange that the child was obviously crying, having light reflecting off the sparkling tears falling down her face. The entire day had been one painful event after another for this child. Later on, when thinking back, it was obviously been a ploy. Every word that despicable man had uttered resounded throughout, over and over, causing the reverberating pain to echo deeper, far deeper than it should have. Not even Irika showing up helped. Even worse, it made everything worse. You are the nine-tailed fox. You are the demon incarnate. While this had shocked the child, ever so deeply, it hadn't been all too hard to believe, considering everything else said. Everything had finally made so much more sense, though it didn't really matter whether it was true or not. No, an existence is just what it is. It can be good or bad, no matter what creature it be. But the fact that the emotional child was believed to be the beast that had nearly flattened Konoha had struck a deeply painful chord. Still, it was the traitor's words just before breaking an S-rank law that had truly caused so much emotional turmoil, causing the child to run. Ha! So what if Irika is here to help? As you can tell, I can easily overpower him. Even if you try, there's nothing you could do. You may be fast from running after your dumb pranks, but you know nothing. Your fighting style? All the academy teachers made sure your forms were terrible. Your knowledge? Your books are altered. Most teachers found one way or another to force you out often enough from their classes. It was so easy to get everyone helping make sure you die as soon as you started fieldwork. I hadn't even needed to coerce anyone. Even Irika didn't correct your obvious mistakes after moving on in class material. He didn't even explain what you didn't understand when he knew you didn't know. Everything you know or can do is a lie. You are weak, helpless. You can't do anything. It's almost funny that the two had let the traitor monologue so long, though it had allowed Irika to recover slightly. Honestly, it's hilarious that nobody else showed up to help during the monologuing, despite it going on for so long. It's insane that Irika didn't deny his lack of help in the academy. He had actually tried to help, but had given up. The other teachers had fixed each stance after Irika did every single time. He'd never even asked why. How could he not notice? Irika had seen them. He would have had to have noticed, right? The mix-ups had done far more problems than anything, so he probably had. Right? It practically felt of betrayal. No, it was betrayal. Sadly, the worst part was that Konoha had betrayed itself with such cruel treatment. Not even the child knew, but should the village learn their demon container's heritage, one could only imagine the devastation that would occur. Not that those who did know spent more than a few seconds within a couple meters before disappearing, let alone helping or comforting the lonely abused child, a child of the 4th Hokage and an Uzumaki heiress. However, this was only the beginning. The Uzumaki heiress was of the purest blood, from the strongest mixtures of Uzumaki and Senju. Then there was the child's father. Unknown even to himself, he was not just a common orphan. His father and mother were not even civilian, but of noble birth. They were undercover in the Land of Fire outskirts. Both had gone so far as to deceive even their own son, in hopes of avoiding disaster, appearing normal, as well as hoping for him a normal childhood, though with some light training included. Anything but normal. An unknown descendant of Senju Tobarama, Minato Namikaze was one of the greatest lineage within the Senju clan. It's impossible to imagine that the pariah of Konohagakure held some of the most powerful blood lineage seen within history. A chakra so dense and potent that the most basic of jutsu are impossible to achieve without incredible chakra control. Added to this, the strongest of Bijou was sealed within, enough to rival even a weakened Bijou. Not only strong of lineage, blood, chakra, but an innate intelligence. It doesn't show through with such debilitated education. A deliberate endeavor of Konoha to stifle the child in any and every way they could. Sabotaged in every sense of the word from birth on. Growing up had been hard. From birth to 6 years old, the blonde had been alone. Of course there was a caretaker up until then, but it was basically abuse, not that it was even noticed as such. Even now, thinking back, little of it would be considered as such by the child. Small meals of terrible quality, sparse bathing, terrible hygienic treatment, little cleaning of a dirty apartment, unwashed clothing, slaps for ill behavior, rumors, forced separation from even the most basic interactions, and so much more, and yet it was so normal that the abused child could register it as such, barely even knowing how to speak properly until the Hokage started visiting at 5 years old, let alone writing, and barely having any human interaction. The child could barely understand most situations. Worst of all, nobody had even tried teaching the ignored child until the academy came about. It didn't take long to realize that everyone knew how to read. Everyone. They even spoke almost perfectly. And yet the blue-eyed child couldn't. It was way too embarrassing to ask, and the Hokage never mentioned nor asked about it. Not wanting to be a burden to the Hokage, seeing as he was the only person that would even bother. It just never escaped the child's mouth. Even now, the child was barely capable of even reading half of what others could. Hiragana and katakana were at least mostly understandable, but there was much in kanji that just couldn't be deciphered yet. There was so much, far too much that had just now become obvious, and yet so much more was lost upon the blonde child. Everyone was against this abused child, their despised demon. Condescending and sneering at the very sight of the small container. Undoubtedly malnourished, abused, and downtrodden, there was little left besides mutilation and death that Konoha had yet to inflict. True, she was never outright attacked, but they weren't gentle when kicking her out of stores. Still, thinking about it, there was Jiji the Hokage, and yet he couldn't be trusted either. All his ninja, all the civilians, everyone about and within Konoha are under his command. Keeping such massive secrets, there was no way he didn't know what was happening in the academy. For every teacher to be doing something, he had to know. He made it out that he was trying to help, even asked if anything was wrong. Had that been a ploy to keep trust in him? No, there really wasn't anyone that could be trusted. Konoha did not want the demon, and the child realized this. As fast as possible, the so-called demon ran. As far away as possible. As deep into the strangely empty wooded area as possible. Using skills picked up from pranking, the child hid where the moonlight landed upon the scroll. There was a jutsu in there that could help escape this hell. Despite developing skills to do so, it was impossible to outrun everyone, to just get away. And having stolen an important scroll from the Hokage himself, they were surely going to come. Unraveling the scroll, the child perused it once more. The first time opening it, blue eyes had traversed every centimeter of paper that had been filled, taking note of every jutsu that could be made sense of, one that might be better to learn than the dreadful clones. A few seemed interesting, and some had built upon others. There were several time or space jutsu, the thief didn't know which, maybe both, but a few seemed to build upon others before it. Deep within though, incredible if true, was a solution. Not understanding many of the words, the child settled for the first anyways, since they all looked hard in one way or another. Having the entirety of Konoha wanting to kill the child, and having finally given them a reason to, it was best to escape. And really, this was the only way that could be thought of. It took some time to piece the kanji together, taking note of the two circles on either side of the squiggles that looked like they were made for either hand, as well as many of the known kanji. Piecing together how to activate the jutsu took a few minutes. What it did? Warp time and space to send to somewhere else. And past was a key word. How it worked? Many hand seals laid underneath the squiggles. Something about numbers represented by hand seals could replace others. They had to be used before placing both hands into place. However, the placement were too far away. Ignoring any and all other comments within, including the warnings, a twin was created with a single hand seal. It kneeled on the other side before glancing up at its creator. The two nodded before flowing through the seal's shone. In pain, just wanting to cry and leave as fast as possible, the two went as fast as possible to activate the past escape jutsu. No matter what lay ahead, or behind as it is, would be far better than staying to be killed. Right on the last hand seal, they heard someone call out. Scared at being discovered, stopped before they could get away, the two blondes, mirror images of each other, panicked and quickly pressed their hands down into the open circles within the scroll. It was best to leave anyways. Nobody wanted a demon around. As soon as clone and creator could, they pushed as much chakra as the two could into the scroll. A bloody Irika hopped down into the small clearing, barely in time to see a bright light engulf his student. His heart froze as the two blue-eyed children started screaming in horrifying agony. Another odd light enshrouded the two, a swirling red swirled around each from top to bottom. The new shroud broke the man from shock, allowing him to rush forward calling out the demon child's name, Naru. Not an instant later had the violent light and chakra disappeared into the void of darkness without a trace. All that was left was a blank scroll with two motionless children lying on each side. Even as he rushed forward, both quickly crumbled into dust. That night had few mourning. By the next day, the entire village was celebrating. The day after, Kanehigakure was left in baffled disbelief, indignant rage, or mourning in despair from the Hokage's declarations. Then fear. A fear that they had accidentally released the beast they all wanted dead. Truly, many felt regret at not being able to save the child, though more from fear of a repeat Bijou attack. Not only had Naru disappeared, chakra completely erased, but so had the beast sealed within. Without a link, knowing the location of the final beast needed, a secret group of people delayed their plot. Unable to find their last target, members eventually left or turned upon one another. By disappearing, Naru unknowingly saved the world. But what happened to her? To anyone that could be watching, all they would see is two strangely shaped colors suddenly appearing out in the darkness. However, there was not a single soul nearby. Had there been, and had it been daylight, they would notice that these two figures were living and breathing, and possibly in need of help. Considering the circumstances, there should have been people surrounding the area. The Hokage should have long since appeared. Anbu should have contained the area. Irika should still be there unfortunately, or fortunately, none of this has, or will happen. Instead, the only out-of-place sound was two very light snoring sounds. Light shone through the treetops, showing the obvious signs of day upon two small shaded figures lying within tall grass. And then a light moan came from within one of the two bundles of orange cloth, and another followed the first. Two pairs of eyes slowly opened at the sound of the second voice. Looking back at each other, both bodies reluctantly sat up, staring at what should be a reflection. Two distinctly childish voices echoed out, though might have sounded like one from another viewpoint. At the same time, both pairs looked upon the head of the opposite, then at the 9 strange waving appendages behind the other unclothed figures. The pointed fur ears upon each head swiveled at the sounds. If they hadn't known any better, let alone thought that the voice heard was their own, either would probably have not reacted. Instead, they turned back to looking at each other's eyes once again. Soon, the reality of what had happened the night before hit hard. Stinging tinged at the corners of their eyes in mirrored fashion, so it's true. Once again, they mirrored their reactions, flinching. However, something kept plaguing their thoughts, keeping their feelings from tearing at them. Pink/purple eyes? If their childish size wasn't a little expected, the two girls might have remarked upon that instead. Or even the many other vast changes. But everything was off. The simple difference in their words stroked a chord. Blinking, both opened their mouth, but somehow one was able to actually speak first, holding the others. No, they're pink. But I see purple. They're even slitted, like a cat's. She pouted, knowing what she was seeing. No. Pink. I know what purple is, and your eyes are not purple. Wait, my eyes. This is so confusing. If you weren't so cute right now, and I hadn't wanted to see all the changes, I'd dispel you. The pink-eyed girl pouted, crossing her arms, and looked away. A twitch of her fur-clad ears told her the other girl was getting up and walking around her. Could she hear better now? This is just too weird. Why hadn't I known I was the QB? Why hadn't they told me? How could they hide something like this? WYGG? Why? Tears started flowing from the standing girl as she pulled one of the still-sitting child's tails up and ran a finger over it. Still sitting, the other child frowned as tears fell down her face as well. I don't know, but he always treated me so nice. Alright, why yeah. But he never said anything. Wouldn't he tell us? I mean me. Wouldn't he? And maybe he **H he was planning to? Coming around to the front of the small child that was her clone, Nura took another full look. This is just too weird though. I mean, I really do have 9 tails, but why are only 2 of them red? For a moment, the sitting child closed her eyes, sadness at the reality of wait, 2 red? She looked at her creator in shock. You have 2 blonde tails, the rest are red. Nura blinked owlishly, dispelling more tears, then knit her eyebrows together. No, I have 2 red tails, and 7 blonde. You're my clone, that's what you have, so that's what I have. Clone Nura looked behind her and saw the difference. Each fluffy tail was casually drifting about, 2 red and 7 blonde, twisting and twirling mockingly. How? Why are mine different? Huh? Nura looked behind her to see that the difference was true. She really did have 2 blonde and 7 red. Each tail easily longer than her own legs, flowing out from the end of her spine. What the? And your hair is mostly red, with only 2 long strands on either side of your purple eyes. The clone said. Nura blinked, gathered some of it up in her hands, and looked at her predominantly red hair, which had been blonde before then. Turning back, she saw her clone had mostly long blonde hair with similarly split traces of red on either side of a middle blonde tuft of shorter hair that narrowed into a point just between her eyes. Weird, both girls mimicked before giggling. The strangeness taking their minds off the cruelty of recent happenings and truths. It was a welcome distraction. Though the subject still kept their minds from wandering too far from it. So I have purple eyes while you are pink? And my hair has 2 blonde strips like my 2 blonde tails, while yours are the opposite with red? Yeah, the clone frowned. And I don't feel like a clone. I feel so much energy too. So much chakra, but it's really weird. Like I'm not quite, I don't know how to explain it. What are you doing, Kai? Kai. You're not dispelling. Nura looked at her clone wide-eyed, which was mimicked by said girl. Wait a sec, ow, nothing, OUWCH. Hey. Clone Nura rubbed her head where she had been hit, after having poked and pinched herself. After realizing that she wasn't dispelling, and actually feeling pain, she looked back, slightly scared, at Nura. I'm not going to dispel. A similar look of shock was reflected. I think you're real, why don't I feel like before either? Nura questioned, then pinched herself as well, looking at the red spot that was left behind, which then quickly faded to perfectly smooth, pale skin. You're right, I don't feel normal either, but not. Turning back to her clone, the two came to a small but stunning revelation. So you're not my clone anymore? You're real? Really real? I think so. But how? The scroll? It had 2 areas for hands. It needed 2, but they were either hand, for a single person. But we're 2, so it sent both to the past, turning us into kids, and it making you real? Does this make us sisters? Both girls looked even more shocked at those final words. Breasts held, fox-like ears and tails straightened and stiff, they stared at one another, hope gathering in their features. 2 young girls, no older than 6, most likely not even 5, fox ears poking from their heads, 9 new furry tails, slitted cat fox eyes, 6 black fuzzy whisker-like scars, and abnormally long canine teeth, both nearly a mirror image of the other, different only in inverse-colored hair, easily siblings in appearance, neither one a clone as first believed. Though both felt strangely different as well. We can be twins, they echoed out, happily as they realized that somehow family had been created for each other. Not just family, but twin sisters. Even if each was literally a copy of the other, born from an accident. A reality Naruto had wished for since before they could remember, though not in the way they had expected, or the type of family imagined. They had still gained a family member. Coming to their conclusion, they hugged in joy, instinctively wrapping and interlinking their tails about the other's frame. A feeling of warmth neither had ever felt before surged between them. Family, finally, I have family. Naruto flinched at the sound in her head, almost believing it to be her own voice. Her thoughts were still with a more teenage voice, which made the sound strange. The voice she heard was more childlike. Did you say that? The other girl had wondered why her sister, her supposed original, had moved so weirdly, then somehow heard her own voice in her head. Though after a moment she realized that it wasn't her. She hadn't thought those words. She, too, had been thinking with slightly older tones. With wide eyes, even as Naruto pulled back, she nodded absent-mindedly, not really knowing why. We can hear each other's thoughts? Naruto nearly squealed within her mind. What? Clone Naruto responded. Really? Naruto nodded before thinking strangely, a small frown on her face as she looked around. Was the grass this tall when we woke up? Both tailed children looked about at the forest surrounding them. At first it had been maybe a quarter-meter tall when they woke up, just over their hips while sitting. The ticklish feeling against their bare bodies wasn't that unpleasant, but strange. Now, it was clearly mid-waist. I think so, Narune? The blonde-red girl muttered, turning hopefully eyes upon the other, slightly dumbfounded at the new name, a look of horror replacing it a moment later as true realization set in about their circumstances. We can't both be named Naruto. Soon enough, the horror was reflected. But that's my name. I've lived with it my entire life. Ignoring the absurdity of such a statement, having been a clone, both started thinking. I know, mine too. But we can't call each other Naruto. How could others tell us apart? Once more, their true situation set upon the two. Everyone? What others? Only 3 people ever called her by name: the Hokage and the Ichiraka family. Even Irika had only started doing so recently, but he didn't count anymore. Everyone else was either brat or some form of derogative, when not outright ignored. They didn't want to remember those people. Pushing the thoughts away, Naruto looked at her former clone. Still, another name. I'm the original, so I think it's only fair we change yours. She pouted at her original, but nodded. Just change E to a Nara. I don't want to change too much, else it will feel too weird. After a second, they broke down giggling, and hugged again. A while later they pulled apart, separating their tails completely this time. They looked around at the surrounding forest. It was already getting dark, but neither had any trouble seeing. The grass is really growing fast, Narune. The red blonde looked about, and saw it was true. It was already up to their chest, though they were still sitting. Yeah, this is so weird. The 2 girls furrowed their brows for a moment, then gave up, shrugging. I really don't want to go back to the village. Yeah, but where else would we go? I mean, this is the past, right? Wouldn't Gigi be looking for us if we just ran off? Who knows how long it will take for him to notice, though. Naruto frowned, but shook her head. Probably. We can't leave the village without passing people either. With our tails showing, they'd hunt us down, maybe even kill us. Both twins' eyes widened dramatically all of a sudden. How do we hide our tails and ears? They stared at each other in shock and fear. We can't go anywhere till we figure that out. Shaking her head quickly in mutual agreement, they started back and forth on thoughts, before deciding to try their henge. Naruto started building up chakra, which quickly became a visible light violet wrapping around her body. Not an instant later, she was tackled to the ground, breaking her concentration. Looking back at her sister attacker, not noticing her quickened breath or expression, she growled, "What was that for?" Naruto for her part was freaking out. Spreading her arms around brought the other twin's attention to what she caused, to which she froze. What? ID did this? Ignoring the nod, or not seeing it, she just continued staring at the meter-tall grass surrounding them. Only where they had been was it shorter, flattened from having the 2 children rolling around in it. Suddenly being surrounded by grass, which quite easily didn't seem like grass anymore, as tall as their full height, was quite daunting. I think your chakra isn't just stronger. The plants are growing from it, Naruto said in awe. She turned back to eye her twin. Use less chakra. Much less. What you pulled out was so much more than we ever used for transforming before. Even though I've never felt someone else's chakra before, but even I felt that. What the 2 girls didn't know was that the forest they were in was surrounded by seals, which had been placed nearly 100 years before, to hold in massive amounts of chakra from being felt. Their luck always being incredible, had thankfully kept them from exposing Konoha to a massive burst of unknown chakra, and bringing attention to them. Naru nodded belatedly. Okay. Less chakra. A lot less? Another nod. Okay. Naru placed a hand on her sister, trying to feel the energy more closely. Focusing on hiding her new features, Naru tried again, this time trying to rein in any that tried escaping her body. Even less. Listening to her sister, she focused on splitting apart the strange new energies that was held within her body. I told you less, Naru barely kept from growling, and spread out what she had, letting go of more than half, doing so again and again, until her sister finally stopped. Running through the hand seals, Naru finally used the technique. A large poof of smoke spread out from the two children, enough to block the vision of any creature within several dozen meters, and reaching half as tall as the surrounding trees. When it cleared, Naru saw what amounted to a single-tailed kitsune. Kind of worked? You still have ears and a tail. Naru almost wept at having to do that again. That was so hard. Hearing a giggle, she turned on her sister, pouting. This only brought more laughter, so Naru lunged and tackled her sister to the ground. They rolled around for dominance for a bit before stopping and laughing together. Okay. Naru laughed again. I'll try now. They stood up and headed back to the larger flattened area of grass. It was strange seeing something that's usually so short be so much taller. It had obviously grown again from trying to use henge. Doing what her sister did, Naru split her energy until it felt similar to what Naru had used. Strangely, they were able to feel chakra, which neither had been capable of before. She lessened it even further. Like stated, it was getting harder and harder to do so as she kept splitting it up. There was just too much, and it all seemed to want to meld together. After another stray thought about it not really following lines anymore, she felt it was small enough. The poof was far smaller this time, only encompassing the two of them with smoke, however the result was the same. Pink-slit eyes, blonde fox ears, and a single blonde tail with two red stripes along its length. A mirror opposite of what her sister had as her henge. Thankfully their canines and claws had morphed into the normal humanesque features. Same thing? Naru responded confused. Naru frowned in confusion. She flicked her single tail a little, as her ears swiveled. Eh? Surprised, she blinked. It doesn't even feel like the normal transformation? Huh! Olishly blinking, Naru reflected the motions of her sister. It's true. I don't feel like I'm trying to hold it either, but that it's still me? A moment of concentration had her full features returning. The two blonde stripes on her single tail split into their own as the red split into 7 almost seamlessly. Claws grew back, and her canines lengthened slightly. That was weird, Naru just stared, openly gaping at the transformation. Weird is wrong. That was neat. Instead of using the hand seals again, Naru focused on the strangeness she felt when releasing the henge, and a moment of concentration had reversed the release process. Once more she was a single-tailed kitsune child, confirmed by looking behind her at the wonderfully over-fluffy tail swishing behind her in wonder. Soon she was mesmerized at the sway, ignoring her sister's words of amazement, even as the twin attempted it herself. Tail, fluffy, cute, want. Not a moment later she spun in an attempt to grasp the object of her recent affections, only to miss and fall sideways. Mid-fall had the tail actually sway back into her arms, luckily, where she hugged it tightly. A giggle broke through. Any, that was really cute. Naru looked up to her sister, who was actually blushing from the sight. Smirking, Naru hopped at her twin, who released a startled yelp as she fell backwards. Hee, I want some of your fuzzy too. No! You have your own! Naru growled, which only brought another giggle as they rolled around, flattening the grass. A second later, the single tail of her sister was tickling her face. Hey! Stop, I hi it! Unable to help themselves, both girls started laughing, albeit for entirely different reasons. Before they knew it, the two had fallen asleep in the middle of an overly padded area of flattened grass. Despite all their grief, sadness, and pain, small smiles graced their whiskered faces. The village of Konoha was a quiet and peaceful place. How such quiet is possible, despite having been created in a militarized aspect, is due to the type of soldiers they house. Since before its creation, ninja have been used as a mercenary force. This hasn't changed. But shinobi and kunoichi are typically taught that silence is one of their greatest assets. As such, their force attempt to move and work with the least bit of sound possible. The civilians are louder than their counterparts. Peace is due to having a force capable of constant protection shielding the people from inherent dangers. Despite having been in several wars, the village has never once been invaded by another militarized force. However, it has been invaded. This would be impossible in normal circumstances. However, due to the type of foe, it was more than possible. An attack of unimaginable proportions had occurred exactly 6 years before. The force to do so was not so much a force of man, but more of a force of nature. The Kyubi attack, a being of incredible proportions, easily more than 100 meters tall, had suddenly sprung up within the very walls of this quiet and peaceful village. It had killed hundreds, and damaged much of the main village area. Ridiculously, if anyone had paid attention to the how of this incredible being's kills, they would notice that most were simply crushed under its summoning, rather than any direct attack. A child born that disastrous night, placed with an unknown burden, a small child with straight red hair, deep blue eyes, and an adorable whiskered face, was being chased through the village by a group of people. No matter how fast this child ran, what small places she crawled through, dirtying shorts and shirt in attempts to evade pursuit even as angry people were at every turn. Luckily for the child, such a strange unannounced commotion was brought to the attention of their village leader, who stepped in quickly, protecting this exhausted child from any further harm. Somehow, the usual protection, whom the small child dubbed Shadow, wasn't around. It was unknown that more than one Shadow existed, though, never having caught more than that of the strange followers, but new entity, S, was usually around. The village leader, however, knew why as soon as he found her, and would ensure such would not happen again. Ever. Thankfully, the terrified child was too tired to do much more than sleep within safe arms. However, a far more important event was taking place elsewhere, at this very instant. On another side of the village, far away from where any large stone faces could be seen, two little foxes were chasing each other around a strange forest. The area had changed drastically within the past several months. It had gone unnoticed by most, having been uninhabited clan ground, and illegal to trespass upon by law. As such, the ninja force left a gap around the area, knowing it was protected from outsiders normally. The forest surrounding it was also mostly ignored due to this. However, civilians were a curious bunch, and had often come to look at the sacred grounds of the near-extinct clan of their beloved Shodame. As such, it wasn't strange that rumors of any change would soon come along in a conversation. Especially when there was a link to what the clan was famous for. From the start, many rumors had spread about the empty residence. A loss of the clan meant dying plants around the area. Of course, this was false. Ghosts creeping around of long-past families was another rumor, but this type was easily spread about any group of people. Many other forms had found its way throughout the populace, including the most recent that some Senju had recently been born, and the clan forest grounds were growing to signify such. A rumor of Tsunadeheim possibly birthing a child, despite her age, had recently been popular. Being a suspicious bunch, the area was quickly scanned soon after the rumors started appearing by ninja. Despite their best effort into finding a cause, not a single clue had appeared. Only a few areas of flattened grass had been found where it was obvious children were playing, but this could be anyone, and held little significance. Children were often finding their way into areas they shouldn't, and the forest they scanned was no exception. Another rumor had popped up by a few children playing within the area, about strange dual-colored foxes. It wasn't so much about foxes themselves rather than having two that held unique pelts. This wasn't as ignored by the adults, however, as not a single indication of such creatures were found by anyone with an age in the double digits. Naturally, Shinobi cared little about this rumor. Only civilians responded to the fact that demons were living within their village walls, especially the sacred Senju grounds. The last rumor, however, was of a bit more significance. Within the last couple months, a shy Hyuga child had been walking through in search of the area, looking for the little foxes of rumor, caretaker hidden away. Something the shy little child will always deeply regret is having spoken about spotting two children playing with plants not too far from her, but beyond her ability to reach with such overgrown plants in the way. Her caretaker is not one to leave out details, nor hide them if not deemed dangerous to speak of. Such a find wouldn't have been of significance normally, but there were two pieces that quickly caught the attention of others. The two children both had little fox ears upon their head, and a fluffy foxtail used to steady their odd movements as they maneuvered about the area. This would normally be thought of as a bad joke, but when added to the fact that one had grown the branch of a tree longer to help jump to another, a little more thought was added. Especially when word of who the rumor started from had surfaced. The strangest part was that the two disappeared a few seconds after being spotted, turning towards the Byakugan wielder, who had been preoccupied with the sudden appearance of her bodyguard. Reacting to her gasp of surprise, she had missed how the two had been able to hide. This last rumor was thoroughly searched by not one, but multiple factions. Even more than just the main or hidden shinobi forces, but a secret force, and a few tracking clans had been tasked to search. The only people who hadn't was the clan of the heiress herself, who thought it to be a joke. Quite hard to believe when the bodyguard had searched mere seconds afterwards, only to see nothing. Unfortunately, not a single lead was to be found. The trees themselves were formed from Mokuton chakra of the Shodai, and the forest itself, grown from this energy for decades, easily hid any chakra that was decently connected to nature. Having no leads, or any indication that there was such an existence, the unofficial search was called off not long after. Declaration that the rumor was false by even the clans of Konoha, however, did not deter civilians from their strange belief that the demon fox was somehow invading sacred grounds. The night of the Kyubi festival was the best choice of time to remove any demonic influences for their walls. A demon fox, no matter the nature, needed to be removed. So the sight of a dozen or so civilians congregated to one side of the forest, a fair ways away from any priority area of patrols, wasn't so surprising. Civilians in a group, by nature, are not the smartest bunch. However, on the other side of the area, closer to the other clan districts, a single little girl in a beautiful little festival yukata had somehow evaded both her father and caretaker to come find the little fox children. It was easy coming to the conclusion that the Knight of the Fox would bring her the best luck to find one. Or two. Grr, I'll get you this time. A little girl jumped from a slim branch to another one that would be too far if it wasn't a few meters lower. Nyahaha, the other child stuck her tongue out when looking back. As she did so, the limb under her extended a little, changing what branch would be the safest and easiest to hope towards next. Obviously, this threw off her pursuer as she did so. Ack. You're so unfair. The blonde-red kitsune child scrambled backwards, hopping up higher, not having another tree ahead that would put her in a direction to chase now. Sorry, but I can't help it. Now hurry, or you'll never catch me. Naru growled again, but didn't comment. Once more, she took off at speeds she could barely keep up with, using claws in attempt to quicken her pace further, as well as barely keeping her from falling off. Ahead, Naru just kept up a small smile. Despite the little taunt, her pace had slowed a bit. Both girls had grown some in the past year or so. They didn't actually know how much time had passed, but it was at least a year, and maybe even two. Several interesting facts had been brought to attention. Many were incredible, others subtle, and a few inane. Their instantaneous shrinkage had torn their muscle memory to pieces. Every little thing had been thrown off, either slightly or significantly. The first few times trying to grab her tail, the little appendage that tends to grab her entire attention when swaying gently, quickly ended up with failure of varied, sometimes humiliating, results. Climbing trees, digging holes, and other such basic motions were so much harder than should have been. Of course, that was one of the more silly bits. Something that had sparked their interest nearly instantaneously was the fact they couldn't be harmed. Well, let's rephrase that. Their injuries heal exceptionally fast, and any blood loss literally disappears into thin air as mist the color of their chakra a few seconds after leaving their bodies. This was found out after accidentally learning how sharp their claws really were. Another fact, one of more direct interest, was their lacking need of nourishment. Food and water, they found, were unimportant within their lives. While they were capable of ingesting such, and would later need to relieve themselves as a result, was completely unnecessary. Despite this, their bodies grew just fine. Better than remembered, actually. Best of all, the two had discovered their chakra were both unimaginably large, and quite unique in and of themselves. Naru wasn't just capable of growing plants, but directing them as well, something she put to use, pressing more than a small amount into another limb, which allowed it to grow twice its normal size and length as she landed upon it, then hopped away in a direction distinctly opposite of her previous destination. Despite having family now, even if she was an accidental creation of a sister, had been far more incredible than Naru would ever have believed. The girl wasn't just a simple person she knew. She wasn't just friendly, nice, or a bit caring. She didn't give off any of those strange auras other people did. She didn't smile with those strange faces which ended up somehow hurting her. The only person relatable would have been Aang, but the serving girl wasn't truly comparable. Sure, she had those traits, but Naru also had outbursts in various other ways. While Aang also griped and tried to make sure Naru was properly taking care of herself, it wasn't quite like family. Naru would get angry, fight, cry, hug, and even prank, like when Naru would wake up purring, not realizing that she was literally put back to sleep, over and over, losing half the day to simple ministrations upon her head and tail, just so Naru could secretly practice hairstyling. Of course Naru had done similar. This almost sounded like she was describing herself, though considering Naru was her twin, in practically every sense of the word, it wasn't that hard to believe that she was. There were quite a few differences as time passed. These were practically non-existent compared to the physical differences though. Once more, Naru pressed energy into the branch she landed upon, however it didn't act as expected. Kya, instead, when she landed, expecting the normal easy-to-grip surface under her bare feet, all that happened was her feet sliding forward. All of a sudden, she was headed for the ground instead of another branch, landing in the tall grass below. Having been lengthened with most of the forest to the average half-meter height, Naru felt no pain within the cushioned landing against her back. A moment later had another presence landing over her, legs spread to either side to ensure no escape. Looking up, Naru saw the pink outline surrounding the limb she slipped on. The crystal was thin, nearly invisible in the darkening skies, but obviously signified Naru had been close enough to touch it just as she did. It was a good plan, considering their chase game didn't end until the prey was caught, rather than touched. Hee, caught you, Nei-chan. The blonde-red sister said proudly as her fingers descended. Kaya haha, I give. Naturally, she couldn't hold back laughing, but the fingers didn't stop for a few seconds, despite her words. Hey. Ha 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 kaya ha. Ha stop haha. Just like Naru had power over plants, it seemed Naru had a similar ability over earth. Naru could grow plants from nothing, though she knew there was little bits of life everywhere that grew to her wishes, despite looking as if nothing was there. Her energy generated the life in plants, growing from the basic form of whatever she applied chakra to, and directed the formation of. Naru, however, needed only water. She could practically create the crystal from nothing, but it was more like she drew the structure from the surrounding air, and it replicated with her energy, just as Naru did with earth. They both needed a basis to start with, and their energy would replicate the rest. Practically everything in nature seemed to be formed of similar bases of either earth, water, and air. This meant the two could bring out their element practically anywhere. It was to this scene a third presence found herself squeaking at. The short figure of a Bluenet had entered the Senju forest with an active Byakugan. She was actually rather thankful her clan had taken her words as a joke. Even Ko, who had been there, looked where Hinata directed to see nothing, had said so. His word was greater than a child's, despite her position. However, as it was considered a joke, had easily and openly talked of it. The Hyuga didn't care of such a matter, and the only other clan that could search with eyes didn't quite have the capability to see such distance, nor cared for the words of another clan, and would rather openly taunt the Hyuga instead. The last two clans that could track, actually had. The Inuzuka clan smelled fox, but couldn't find the source. Several holes were found, indication of foxes, but not once had there been a sighting. Aburame, however, recalled any that tried. Their Kakacha said the forest was even full of more chakra now than they remembered in decades, their collective hive mind allowing vast recall of information long past, despite their short lifespans. Even if not malevolent in nature, more attuned to the forest than anything, was just too much for any bugs that actually did get close to the source. The little trackers may not have died upon contact with either possible target, but they did refuse to leave once finding their target, rendering any possible conclusive information from returning to their hosts. The Aburame, considering the location, merely stated that nature's influence was just too overpowering within the area, and getting stronger. As such, the only viable information to go on, confirmed by a few Inuzuka, was that there was an actual possibility of foxes, not that ninja actually cared. Pushing through the tall grass, something that seemed to be spreading, the Hyuga child searched. Close and far, high and low, Hinata attempted to find the two children from before. Luck had been with her that night, as she had prayed the festival day would, giving her a sighting nearby of the two jumping around. What she had seen more incredible than she saw the first time. Fast as she could, the two were faster, but their roundabout directions allowed her to catch up. Soon enough the two had ended their chase, and she pressed herself even further, slipping through enlarged bushes, climbing over a few felled trees, and finally coming upon the two laughing. Within range, she finally released her eyes, the drain too much for continuous usage. Watching the smirking girl on top tickling the one underneath, begging to be released, had a smile finding her face. She wished she could play like that with her Oniai-san, but he was always pushing her away, angry at life. Her little sister was still young, and Hinata didn't want to harm her either with such a game. It was still weird to see two girls playing alone in a forest near dusk. Even more when the two had fox ears and a tail of opposing red and blonde colors. Something was strange though. Their clothing looked different. She couldn't put her finger on it, but the material, maybe? Was different. Due to the tall grass, it was hard to make out the laughing one underneath the other, but the one on top had a pink kimono blouse that ended just over her tail, leaving most of her legs bare, with a red sash tied in a butterfly knot behind her back. The other twin, as the two obviously were, had a light violet kimono with a bright yellow blonde obi, tied similarly. She wondered how they were made, but it seemed fitting, with their shortness designed to both allow their tails full roam while hiding their bottom and special place even bent over as the blonde twin was, especially with their tails. The calm, light, playful atmosphere of the two having fun gave her the courage to hello. Two slitted pairs of eyes of pale violet and pale pink, both somehow reminding Hinata of crystals, had snapped to her. The joyful atmosphere and soft natural environment had all stilled. Hinata flinched with a squeak, and quickly slid behind a nearby tree trunk, near seamlessly fading from existence. Despite trying to hide, half her face was still visible to the twins, as she looked for their reaction. The sudden eerie quiet that surrounded two immensely shocked Kitsune girls didn't seem to bode well, causing the short-haired girl to start trembling. Both twins, seeing and smelling her fear, looked back towards one another. How did we not notice her? Naru practically freaked at the revelation. Another unexpected addition to their skill sets had been an enhanced sense of smell. But it wasn't only that. I don't know. She's terrified. But I hadn't felt her either, not until we both looked at her. Vaguely, they had been able to feel people around them. It wasn't something they quite understood, but when a person had some type of intention that bordered on the negative side, said person quickly stood out among their senses. Of course it was only within a certain range, and far more prominent in closer proximity. Wait, isn't that? Taking a closer look, the figure of the intruding child was exceptionally familiar. The scent too, but differentiating others by smell wasn't something they had learned until recently. And yet, she was familiar. Yeah, I recognize her too. But if she is, that might explain why we ignored her as a threat. What was her name again? From the first few days since arriving, had been to stay away from others. Humans specifically, but dogs too. The cute and cuddly creatures had somehow become one of their most feared. Should we run? She already closed her eyes. It would give us a chance to easily escape without notice. Looking back at each other for a moment, they shook their heads, both deciding not to run. Naru rolled off her sister to stand up, which was followed by Naru. This was the first contact with another in over a year, and the only feeling towards them at all was fear, which only happened after trying to get their attention. Hinata, for her part, was now completely hidden from the two. As soon as they looked at her with those narrowed cat-like eyes, she had broken down in fear. Despite the obvious differences, it reminded her of the clan, always studying her, picking apart everything she did. They were different, but still similar at that moment. At hearing the sound of the two girls moving towards her, she tried to shrink in on herself and into the tree. Hello? At hearing the little eat from the short-haired girl, the twins looked at each other in worry. We aren't going to hurt you, Tabane despite herself. Naru blinked at the quirk, before shrugging. Both she and Naru did it habitually, but very rarely around one another. For it to pop up so quickly, it reminded her of before the incident. Yeah, you're not in any danger. You don't even feel like you'd hurt a fly, let alone us. Naru continued on, more confused than before at the still shivering, familiar stranger. Why would we hurt someone like that? We'd rather run. And usually do. Hearing that was a bit comforting, though hearing the same voice from two different directions was a little confusing. Tentatively opening her eyes, she came to the sight of cuteness. Unlike before, the image of affection was the most apparent upon the twin faces. With whisker-like markings, beautiful cat eyes that's more cute than fearsome, Hinata couldn't help but stare, but seeing the twitching ears moving around, the child couldn't help but toss the rest of her restraint down the metaphorical drain. Kya! All of a sudden Naru's sight was surrounded by grass, pointed up at treetops with a strange comforting sensation flowing along her head, and a giggling over to the side. In the few seconds this took to register, she had already stopped caring about why that was, let alone thinking about it. The spreading pleasant sensations were far more important. Naru was attempting, and failing spectacularly, at holding her laughter. Almost as soon as she opened her eyes, the strange girl tackled her sister in a hug, only to start petting her sister. And if she was reading the situation right, both were in a state of euphoria, not her exact words, but she knew what was happening, both visibly and through the mental link. It took a few moments for Hinata to realize what she was doing, mostly because she realized the second ball of cute fluff was laughing quite loudly. However, the sight of a second caused a repeat reaction. Naru quickly found herself in a similar state as her sister, on her back with small hands ministrating pleas that went coursing throughout her body. Between the three, Hinata was probably getting the most though. Hearing the two fox-haired girls purring as she pet them, cuddling up between the two, had brought pleasure she hadn't felt since her mother passed. And even then, this was completely different kind. To her utter disappointment, however, both twins sat up, stilled with wide eyes. Hinata looked between the two, not understanding the sudden change. Even their tail fur had puffed out dramatically, which she knew was a sign of fright or anger on cats. The twins looked at each other, fear evident for some odd reason, and she knew it wasn't her from their reactions, thankfully. What's wrong? Is something wrong? With her stutters at an all-time minimum, she had managed to squeak out a question. Shivering simultaneously, the inversely colored kitsune looked at Hinata, slightly suspicious. Did she bring them? I don't think so, Nei-chan. There's not a single negative feeling from her, besides the obvious fright we just caused. Naru responded, brows furrowing. We can't leave her either. We don't know why they're here, but it's probably us. If they find her, there's no telling what might happen to her while looking for us. The feeling these people are giving off is, yeah, both girls shivered again as a few more dark spots entered their range. But we can't hide her. We don't have enough room, we just have to make another with a bigger entrance. They gazed at each other once more before breaking off. People are coming. Lots of them. And they feel so dark. Hinata frowned, confused, and still wanting to pet the twins more, but nodded. Using a hand seal, she activated her Byakugan, and looked around. There really were a bunch of people out in the woods. And many were actually headed their way. She stopped flooding chakra into her eyes. Wyrth they here. It was incomprehensible why dark people would be coming. What did that even mean? They glanced at each other again. Hinata, knowing about the QB, kind of understood. But what it had to do with the twins she didn't know. But looking like they were part fox, at least, made a little sense. We need to hide. And fast. We don't want them to find you either. Naru finished. Oh, okay? Hinata was even more confused, but followed along as the twins headed towards a thick area of nearby trees and bushes. Kneeling down, she followed the leading twin underneath a thick bush, a hole in the branches that was barely obvious before kneeling down. How had they seen it? In the middle of the thicket, Naru closed her eyes. Hinata was wondering what she was doing, but her answer came a moment later when branches and roots started flowing about in front of the red-haired girl. Dirt just seemed to slide around, roots creeping about, pushing the dirt to the side, before opening up in the middle. A hole slowly grew in the middle of the roots, large enough for the children to crawl into. However, the sound of roots shifting kept up for another minute or so before stopping. Hinata's wide-eyed stare was ignored as the blonde twin crawled around the two and into the hole. Naru ushered the stunned brunette into the hole, before following after her. It flowed downward for quite a bit, but at an easy slope. Once more, she stilled as the leading twin pressed her hands to the ground before what she could barely make out to be the tunnel's end, which opened up into what seemed to be a cavern, encased within roots. Naru focused her chakra over the upper root system, encasing, freezing, and extending it. The roots turned colder, and started smoothing over as pink-filled ice encased them. Somehow, it seemed that the area grew slightly brighter, as if the ice itself was glowing. The area lightened a shade similar to the ice. He crawled inside the area, which was about as big as a large family room. Naru, following Hinata inside, now had enough visibility to see with the cold crystal amplifying it to finish. Pressing her hands to the root floor, she willed a bed of flowers into existence from the roots. The colors were random, but the darkness made it difficult to pinpoint specific colors. As it is, Hinata could barely tell why the hard ground had turned soft, much less see what happened, but the sense gave it away. Flowers? Ah, hi. I grew flowers to make the ground soft to sleep on, and I made the roof to help reflect more light, letting us see, as well as keeping us cool. You can't see? Hinata looked up at the soft pink glow above, but could barely make out shapes. Huh! We can see fine, oh yeah. Naru glanced at her twin. We can see better than before, can't we? Uh-huh. She nodded. It's probably that. Hey, you can sleep here tonight with us. Nobody will find us this deep. Besides, it's kind of nice to have someone else nearby that doesn't mean any harm. Is this normally how you live? Hinata couldn't hide her surprise. More by the harm than the rest, though all of it just as surprising as the rest. For a while now, yeah? It's comfortable, nobody bothers us, and we can hide from anyone. Except the girl in front of them. Somehow, she had snuck up. Even now, they can only barely feel her, but that was mostly because of the slight fear she was letting out. That, and they really didn't understand what most of those feelings were, or why it was only the bad parts they could feel. It didn't help that it was so vague. But we're fine. We don't need anything, and we're safer this way. Naru cut her off, not wanting to be pitted or anything like. People don't react well to us, so we avoid them. Naru finished off, kind of emotionlessly. From the start, they were practically ignored all of Naru's life. Only getting attention, albeit negative attention, when playing pranks. She had more attention from Naru, or vice versa, in the past months than her entire life before the change. Being the same person, while being a different person, was quite confusing. Hinata didn't know how to respond to that. It was so sad, having nobody but themselves, hiding from the world. No home, no parents. They didn't have parents, right? The brunette couldn't imagine living like that. How would she get food? She couldn't make a home like they could. The answer was simple, she couldn't. We should go to sleep. The hole isn't going to be found by the people out there. And it isn't safe to leave either. Hinata looked back and forth from the disorienting twins. Hearing the same voice come from either side of her, echoing off crystal within the darkness, was quite dizzying. Nodding her assent, she laid down on the unbelievably soft bed below her. Before she knew it, two soft fuzzies were curled up around her, removing any more worries. Slightly, only just, the twins could hear the voices just outside the hole. Despite telling their new friend to sleep, they couldn't. Felt chakra nothing something over there, an idiot around somewhere not nearby. Somehow, people had come close to the entrance. They didn't know how, or why anyone knew of them, but people were searching for them. Only children had seen them so far, because they never had these feelings about them. But the people above were close. Thankfully, no adult could get into their hole easily, let alone find it. Or so they hoped. It was going to be a long night. Outside, in the festival, there was a hidden panic. Not only had the Hyuga heiress disappeared several hours before, but they had yet to find her. It was long past midnight, and every Hyuga was out searching the village without result. In fact, by the time it was dawn, a council meeting had been called, only for it to be cancelled a few minutes later when the heiress had miraculously reappeared. Apparently she had gone exploring a forest when a bunch of scary-looking people entered it as well, and spent the entire night hiding from them. It was completely true, just without a few minor details of why she was there. A simple fox hunt by the civilians nearly put the entire village on high alert. Despite the trouble she caused, there wasn't any severe consequences Hinata had to endure, maybe even a little praise at being able to escape notice overnight. Though there were some consequences, such as a closer guard, and a bit harsher treatment from the elders. They may have punished her from running away from civilians, but there was no assurances that the forest invaders were merely civilians. However, the shame felt within the village as her story circulated was unheard of. A ridiculous goose chase, which had obviously ended without a single result, again, had scared a child into hiding all night long, alone, in the woods. Even the Hokage felt old at that point. They may have been empty, but they were clan grounds. Usually the clan itself takes care of intruders and the like. But the compound itself was sealed, and the forest relatively safe to allow trespass, usually by academy students, which nobody truly minded. They were just lucky nothing happened. Somewhere in said woods, two girls were looking out upon the village from within. We never heard her name. Blonde hair turned to the side. Ya think she'll come back? Her excitement easily displayed by perky ears. I hope so. Her hands felt really nice. A red tail started swaying from side to side. A giggle responded to the strange statement. The two fled back towards their safety zone, ignoring the large walled complex nearby. It had some strange invisible wall over the walls they couldn't bypass, nor could they tunnel under. Obviously abandoned, they had tried, and failed, to enter. There wasn't even a lock upon the gate, yet it wouldn't budge. As such, it quickly dissipated from thought as the sight dissipated from view behind them. Come on! I'll race you to the falls, slitted Violet thinned as her sister took off into the trees. Oh, no you don't. Tail twitching at the sudden challenge, Nura left the ground, quickly following her sister towards said destination. Hurry up, Slowpoke. Heeding the mental words, she increased her pace, using her natural affinity with plants to position herself in advantageous tree-hopping positions. Soon enough, the leading fox-herd girl came into view. Gonna get you. Feeling her twin nearing, Narua smirked. Feeling a slight wind against her back, she smirked. She quickly took off from the branch. Kya, that was dirty. Looking back, just as she landed, Narua let out a little giggle at her twin's expense. Face first in the grass below, tail twitching in annoyance, laid her pranked sister. Just overhead, upon the branch both had stepped upon mere seconds before, pink reflected in the morning sun, as if mocking the downed child. Having successfully pulled one over on her sister, Narua continued onwards towards their destination, ignoring the indignant complaints and promises of payback flowing through their mental link. She had no doubt there would be. It was still worth it. Hey, are you seeing this? Black slits narrowed as wide pink eyes attempted to expand into saucers. I think so? Surprised and awed by the sight, a twin blonde striped red fox just stared at the strange intruding figure, jaw practically on the ground. Is that really possible? Damn it! Where are they? A feminine voice grunted out from high above. The sound shocked the two fox shapes below, making them crawl deeper into the grass, and further from view. Their motions near soundless even to themselves. It still drew the attention of their apparent purser, who quickly looked about the area before shrugging it off. You think she's looking for us? The twin red striped blonde fox mentally asked, quietly. Who else would people be looking for out here? All we've seen are rabbits, mice, and birds, the other mentally sighed, while trying to keep herself as small as possible. Not true. There are snakes. Yeah, I don't want to get caught by one of those again. Both refused to shiver at that thought, not with the kunoichi above sniffing around, listening intently. Grr, they're around here somewhere. It should be easy. Damn overgrown grass. She crouched down in preparation to jump, which looked awkward with the diagonal angle she was at, standing on the side of the large tree with a hand holding her slightly upright, instead of completely sideways. A few leaps had her on the other side of the large clearing, before she started sniffing again. Another figure appeared nearby, which caused the twins to shiver. Despite not feeling anything except frustration from the woman, they hadn't cared to show themselves to either. The scent of both were running havoc with their instincts. While either felt like a threat on the emotional level, their physical senses were saying otherwise. Calm down, Sim, they're here. But if you let your emotions take over, it will just be that much harder to find them. The second voice shocked the twins into pure disbelief. Sigh, I know. But their damn scent is everywhere. They even smell so similar that I can barely tell that it's two instead of one. Confusing is tame in this instance. This caused a sigh from the four-legged speaker. They really are looking for us. I don't get it. How do they even know we're here? We've only shown ourselves to kids. Don't parents usually ignore what they say? Every time we ever played with another kid, no matter what they said to their parents, it was always ignored, and were told to stay away from us. Naru refused to believe the innocent kids would be able to pull a Konoha Kunoichi's attention, but that was not the only possibility. You don't think it could be that blue-haired girl? But she said she would never tell. And it didn't feel like she was lying. Let's move. Hopefully they're far enough now. With the pursuers hopping to another set of branches a tiny bit further, the twins felt they had enough distance to move slowly about, and started heading towards the closest entrance to a pre-built den. Having a little bit of distance from the two voices, the twins slowly back away. Even if they could barely see far enough through the grass to find the two sources of concern, their keen eyesight was still capable of keeping track, and hearing maintaining a second assurance of location. Maybe it was the kids. We should probably ignore any for the time being. Yeah, but I really don't wanna. Neither do I. But, turning around, they started moving quicker towards their closest escape tunnel. Grr, it's like they've been playing all over the area for days. Without sleep. The spiky brown-haired woman turned to her partner. Kuramaru, you found tracks earlier, right? Hi, but with the overabundance of plant life, I was unable to follow any trail. Let's return. Their scent is all over the forest, and if they really are spending so much time in certain areas, it's unlikely we'll find their den. With most of their scent obviously focused away from their home, I doubt we'll find a lead, the large wolf-like dog supplied. But the woman tried, only to be cut off. Haven't you noticed? The wolfish dog nearly growled out. Surprised, the woman sniffed again, looking for anything off. It took a moment, but her eyes went wide. There's no scent of blood. Nothing more than the tiniest of injuries that normally permeate a forest. Kuramura nodded. They're not hunting. Either they are intelligent, and capable of completely removing any traces, or someone is caring for them. Sim pondered this for a bit, perplexed, before shrugging. Guess we really don't have any leads. If there was a blood trail, it would have easily led to a den. But like this, if someone is caring for them, then maybe we don't have to worry. Either way, let's go back, Kuramaru. The wolf dog nodded, before jumping away, followed by Tsum. What he didn't say was that the fox scent was odd. They were mixed with human. It wouldn't be odd for the two foxes to be pets of a human, however this was different. They weren't just mixed with human scent, but the scent itself was mixed. It's nearly impossible to recognize, but there were another pair of scents, human-like, that had fox mixed in. They were a perfect counter for the fox scents, and yet so similar. He didn't know what to make of it. But it seemed the foxes really were being cared for by two humans too, because, like the foxes, they seemed to be twins. The coincidence was uncanny. I feel them moving away. Slitted Violet turned towards the other pair of slightly glowing eyes. Yeah, but why? They'd been out there all morning. What changed? She shrugged, just happy that they were able to finally escape. Despite their dislike of the overgrown grass, it made moving about unseen quite easy. Even with their distinctly colorful coats, it was hard to find them if the grass was several times their own height. Let's just rest for the day. Naru simply curled up on the flower bed in their den. Just like the others, it was a dome-like cavern, at least 10 meters in diameter with most of it over 2 or 3 meters in height, allowing their full human-sized bodies easy maneuvering, built at least 15 meters deep, with a fox-sized entrance. Neither knew why, but silently felt that deeper homes were better. The roots encasing the roof were covered with a thick layer of ice, both keeping a comfortably cool temperature and dim glow lighting. Naru's ice was far from normal, and both knew it. Neither knew why, but the pinkish chakra that was used to form the glowing crystal had always somehow managed to ingrain itself within any ice formed. Strangely, this produced several phenomena that the twins could only barely understand. With it being her ice, Naru instinctively knew that there was more chakra within her creations than needed to merely create the ice. With that known, they had concluded that being the reason her ice was the color of her chakra, which allowed it to glow. On top of that, it somehow prolonged the time it took for any ice to melt. So far, only the first den they had created this way had melting ice, and it was only halfway gone. The second would have as well, but Naru pushed a little bit of chakra into the ice, which proved that her chakra was indeed keeping it cold. Multiple entrances lined each den, all of varying sizes, allowing the two several areas of escape and rest. They had even interlinked many of these areas. It was easy with Naru's natural aptitude with plants, allowing her to feel where the dens were, so she was literally standing on the side of the tree. Naru mentally giggled. Too excited by what you saw to rest too, huh? Yeah, I can't wait to try it. Don't you want to know too? Obvious excitement lit her mental voice. Shifting into her human form, Naru allowed the soft flower bed to caress her skin. While fur was nice, skin allowed more pleasant sensations in certain situations. Yeah, I do. We'll figure it out, hee. The shift was quickly followed by her sister. Just not today, I guess. Sigh. Their new forms also allowed them a more sensual comfort when sleeping together, which was why they quickly curled up together. Yeah, not with the possibility of the dogs coming back. They both shivered at the thought. Neither really understood it, but were quite fearful of the dogs. It was an ingrained instinct they felt. Even if they are supposed to be the demon fox, Kyubi no Kitsune, there was a natural fear towards the animal. They figured it was due to being foxes themselves, children at that, despite their supposed existence as a powerful being. Knowing they were more powerful apparently had little influence on instinct, though they found that instinct was telling them to stay away from others, not just dogs. Still, they now had a new trick to try. Warning, notes, okay, so people are wondering why Hyuga aren't searching for them? Especially now? I kind of didn't want to elaborate, but it should be a bit obvious. Maybe not so much, but it's easy to understand if you know the basics within the manga. Probably at least to me it is. Then again, it's my story and understandings, so maybe not? I'll just write, well, that's simple. They simply don't care. It's beneath their notice to look for dumb animals. For those that do look, it's not quite so simple. The forest itself is just that, a forest. There are hills, streams, rock formations, and many other various features. From what I've seen in the manga, not the stupid misconceived anime version, Konoha itself is massive. The wall itself is at least 25 m tall, but supposedly surrounds the Hokage monument entirely, not just linked together with it. I mean, what kind of planning would that be? Leaving an open forest hanging over the village, just inviting enemies to make use of its natural height advantage? Just gather a dozen shinobi, give them each a scroll containing hundreds of kunai explosives, and unleash it downward? No, the wall surrounds Konoha with the monument at its center. From the manga view, though vague, doesn't appear to connect them either. In the scene before Deva Path turns the place into a crater, it actually shows the side of the cliff face curving back, rather than a connecting wall. The cliff appears at least half a kilometer wide as well, making Konoha at least a kilometer in radius. Probably at least 2 kilometers in diameter. Where would the training grounds be? Inside the village, right? Not counting 44, in most images in the anime, there's no room. Obviously this is because they messed up, and don't show behind the monument as part of it. What of clan districts? They have to have their personal training areas too, right? They also wouldn't want to be in the middle of Konoha either. Basically, I have one half of a circle behind a minimum 4-kilometer diameter Konoha to work with, logically, probably even more. That's easily enough to give a half-kilometer to Senju grounds, with similar or smaller areas for clans that joined Konoha later. They didn't all join at the same time, so half a square kilometer, 5,002 m, of forest might not seem much, but is quite a bit for 2 small foxes to roam. Hills, ponds, streams, ditches, caves, everything a normal area that large might have, and more with training taking place, gives much area to hide in. Then we take in the fact that Hashirama spent at least 20 years living there before dying. His potent chakra enhancing, reinforcing, altering, and basically remaking this area to fit his needs and natural energy. Far more than Konoha or anywhere else, it would easily last decades, hiding even potent energies within it. Then taking into fact that both the twins are drawing in natural energies to feed themselves, although without realizing it, and putting out their own form of chakra which is slowly feeding into the forest, slightly changing it to feel like themselves, we can see that it would eventually hide the two of them. Anything they make or anywhere they hide would be naturally concealed. An underground formation of their design would look much like the forest above. Their chakra coalesces nearby, but slowly spreads out to refrain from condensing too much. Any scent would typically cling to where their energies are denser, which would also make an entire area smell like them, instead of just dispersing. The plants grow faster from their ambient chakra, though barely visible, when Naru is around, forcing any changes to the plants and trails back to their original state, quickly hiding trails. Basically, in the forest, unless they are using their chakra, it would be nearly impossible to find them if they don't want to be found. And since their chakra is pervading the entirety of the forest, their senses are keener, chakra and emotion-wise, to pick up those around, making it even easier to know when to hide. Very few would be capable of going invisible. Basically, they have the perfect home to remain safe within. But only within. Still, this just shows how incredible an Uzumaki's luck is. But who knows how long that will last. Eheed, splash, Kaya! Hey! Turning around, the fox Hanyu pouted before smirking. Twisting quickly, she brought her tail up and flicked the end towards her inversely colored twin. Violet eyes widened before ducking underwater, narrowly avoiding the spray. Ha! Naru frowned for a moment, before leaning down. Just as red hair poked above the surface, she lunged. The resulting splash covered the yelp of her sister. Rolling around underwater, they struggled for a few seconds before separating to break surface. Girl, I'll get you for that. Eyes narrowed, she looked around. Dense forest surrounded the duo, who were playing within a wide stream. A decent-sized waterfall several meters away gave indication as to why the stream was a little deeper than should be. A small outcropping of rock on either side of the falls made for a decent platform to jump from. Hey, despite their recent antics, Naru's voice held little playfulness. This caught her twin by surprise. You think we could head into the village? I miss ramen. Yeah? I do too. But you know we can't go out looking like this. We still haven't found a way to hide them. Naru grumbled, pouting at their failures. Their changes had many interesting facts about their bodies they had discovered. First was that they didn't need to eat anymore. Second was that sleep came easily, but they could go without for as long as they didn't want to. Many nights were spent playing, but generally they slept. While these facts were a pleasant discovery, there were also some unpleasant. Their jutsu, the few they knew, almost didn't work anymore. Kawarimi and Bunshin had become unavailable to them. Henge was harder, but they eventually got it down. For some strange reason they figured out that they had to use less chakra. But it was something that took days to figure out. Kagebunshin was the only jutsu they had no issue with, strangely. Still, even if they wanted to use Henge, there was the issue of their fox parts. No matter what they tried, the foxy features just wouldn't change. Transforming their age and gender went without issue, but changing to another's appearance and removing body parts were all but impossible. Everything was always deformed or unchanged. However, they quickly found that they could alter their appearance at will when it came to anything that has to do with their fox side. All 9 tails could be merged into a single, far fluffier, tail that was only a third shorter than their height and length. Aside from that, they could shift to the form of a small fox if they wanted to. The only reason they still used hand seals when shifting from human to fox was to include their clothes within the transformation. Somehow, thankfully, they didn't need to concentrate when it came to transforming when it came to these forms. Only everything else. You can just make clothes to hide them then? Naru pointed out, perking up after a few minutes of thought. Her twin blinked olishly before brightening up drastically. Yeah. That makes it easy. She all but scrambled out of the river, followed by the blonde kitsune. They mimicked each other's movements, trembling and shaking off the excess water, similar to other animals, removing the dampness from their fur. It didn't dissipate all, but got them mostly clean. Okay, we need to cover our ears and tail, right? Naru sat cross-legged among the shorter grass along the river's edge. Thankfully it hadn't overgrown too much, mostly thanks to the water itself removing any that might have lengthened so much. Yes, small arms crossed as the nature-attuned child thought, a small pout forming. It can't stand out. I still want to hide, so it can't be obvious, but we're going to stand out anyways with our eyes and whiskers. People always knew who we were with our whiskers showing. They'll know. The twins' eyes widened at that realization. They'll know who we are immediately. Gigi's probably been searching for us too, so we'll have to hide that. Yeah, but how? Both saddened at this, but Naru's glance at her sister picked up something interesting. Their hair was far thinner than before, soft and full, just like their foxtails and ears. But another change came with it. The long strands were mostly straight, but the few that were below shoulder length were curling. Hair, huh? Naru looked up, then tilted her head. Hair? Her brows furrowed. Yeah. Hair. The mostly redhead declared, smirking like a fox. We'll hide it with our hair. Make something sharp to cut with. Naru frowned, but complied. First she formed a comb, something she had taken to doing to keep their hair straight and neat. A moment later, she started thinking about something flat and sharp. She pulled the little water still nearby into her hand, and added chakra to form a short blade. It was a simple knife in appearance, but the thought of sharp made it more than simple. Here, brushing their hair didn't take all too long. Soon after had Naru gathering a blonde clump of hair on one side, before she sliced through it just past chin length. This was copied on the other side as well. Now she had a point of red hair forming just between her eyes along her nose, with the two blonde strips flowing out over either side of her eyes and curling back to cover her cheeks, which had additionally covered her whiskers. The rest of her long red hair fell to just above her tail along her back. Forming a mirror of ice, Naru took a look at the results of her sister's meddling. The blonde was quickly left with her mouth smiling at the ingenious of it all. And it looked really cute too. My turn. It didn't take long for an inversely colored reflection to have appeared across from Naru, giggling at the tickling for a cross fur. They didn't realize it for so long, but the whisker scars were actually an imperceptibly thin layer of dense fur. Okay, now for clothes. The only thing I can think of that wouldn't look strange is a yukata. The red-tailed child supplied. I was thinking that too. Normal colors? Pink-slitted eyes looked on, more demanding than questioning. Yeah, I'll do our normal colors. Naru nodded. Looking around, the two walked about the nearby area for the flowers needed. Naru with yellow and pink, and Naru with red and violet, as close to their eye and hair colors as possible. They also searched out a few various types of vines. Once more together, Naru nodded. Pushing chakra into the flowers, she willed the petals to shift, grow, thicken, widen, and conform to her desires. The results would be plain, but soft and smelled delightful. In a few minutes, Naru was wearing a pink ankle-length yukata, with sleeves along their arms to match their forearm length and width, tied with a burnt yellow sash, hiding the thin green vine ties underneath that held it together properly. Naru was dressed similar, only having the kimono a light shade of violet and a red obi instead. Though the colors didn't exactly match their own personal colors, it still looked quite nice. Grinned at each other, they accepted the results, but faltered in mirrored mimicry upon seeing the other twins' ears pointed tall. They shifted in annoyance at the sight. Okay, still need one more. And then the two sat down, though more ladylike with the yukata blocking their normal motions, into a seiza. Something that would hide our ears, but wouldn't look strange. It's too hot for a cloak, and straw would look weird. Naru continued. Hats are too easy to remove by wind. Needs to be cute. Should it still be a hood? Yeah. Naru frowned and fidgeted in her clothes. Hey, Naru looked up. Seeing her sister trying to get comfortable, already knew the issue. Besides their mental link, they had this problem with the battle kimono they had taken to wearing, so was common. She reached forward and focused on the plant cloth and allowed it to tighten and loosen about her sister to a comfortable fit. The back of the obi grew a tiny bit, allowing the butterfly bow to straighten into perfection, albeit unintentionally. Sorry, Naru nodded. Okay, so a hood, but it should wrap around the shoulders too? Understanding, Naru focused on the flowers again. Another petal, matching the obi, was focused on. Soon it grew into something resembling a cloth, ruffled and loose, but mimicking the top part of a cloak. Smiling, she put it around her twin's head, laughing as she struggled to avoid it. Hey. This one's yours. It's not my color. Despite her struggles, the blonde twin couldn't keep it from being placed upon her. Eventually she gave up. She pouted, crossing her arms and looking away. Naru took in her sister's appearance. Despite everything, it fit well. Just not enough to look normal by other people's standards. Though her upbringing was rough, she had seen enough of others around Konoha to at least understand what looks wrong or terrible. Though it had been a while, mostly, she had been trying to mimic that weird girl's clothes from that night a few months back. Realization dawned upon the sunny-haired girl as Naru focused upon slight changes. Forgetting her annoyance immediately, she decided her added input would be better. Hey, my ears too. Can you fix that part too? For a second Naru pondered, then nodded. Two pieces of the cloth plant shifted upwards above Naru's head, allowing her ears to fit comfortably within. She knew they couldn't show their real ears. But hiding them in plain sight? That left her laughing inside. After it looked normal enough, she pulled it off her sister, and copied the process upon the other flower for her sister's hood. They donned their own, allowing the ruffled material to enshroud their shoulders and cover the tops of their heads. Their hair was allowed to flow freely from underneath the red and yellow cowls/shawl like hoods. It was strange, because it nearly hid their primary hair color while highlighting the secondary that was covering their whiskers. Cute, they reflected before giggling. It was a long-standing effect of their split. Though they tried to be different, it always ended up with both acting and saying things at the same time all too often. Looking up, they could easily pick out the morning air that still permeated the forest. The time it took to form their new attire was surprisingly short. With foxy grins, they turned to each other. Time for ramen? Ramen time! The other replied excitedly. Quickly they headed towards where they felt the most darkness. Even if the feeling was vague, almost non-existent the further away, it was still quite easy to pick out where large groups of people were. After a while they had started recognizing the feelings as people, so they still knew that Konoha was nearby, along with its direction. Eventually, hopping up into the trees, they allowed their tails to flow freely, which barely allowed them to poke out the bottom of their new yukata. Despite the natural length, their tails were always curved somewhere, so it always appeared half their body length instead. Once again, they started a chase to their destination, as they always do, laughing and growling along the way. Though they didn't know it, their games had quickly ingrained their natural movement and understanding of their bodies into their minds. And without worries of injuries, they had been able to do whatever crazy stunts they wanted without fear, pushing this even faster and furthering their instinctual understanding. Landing on the outskirts of the forest, they looked out with their slightly glowing slitted eyes, anticipation and excitement glaringly obvious. You ready? Blonde glanced over. Yeah, something strange was happening within the walls of Konoha. What this was, not a single person quite knew. Birds were not singing their normal songs. Cats were not quietly meowing. Dogs were not simply barking. The animals were completely quiet. This kind of effect was not usually noticed, not even by some of the ninja. Hiruzen looked out from his window, frowning. Even though most couldn't place it, the people could feel a tiny, near imperceptible presence. To civilian and ninja alike, there was a sudden feeling within their walls that hadn't been there before. It was nearly undetectable, silent and non-threatening, calming even, but present everywhere, and almost missed by even the most experienced of ninja. Those that could affect the entirety of Konoha with their presence alone could be counted upon a single hand. Hiruzen was one of those few. Yet, even he was unable to do it without the underlying announcement of a threat. Not so subtly. Nor so quietly. Whoever was causing such a vast, yet nearly undetectable feeling to permeate their walls had to be powerful beyond even him. The fact that the presence was actually comforting to feel had not done anything to soothe his worries. The true issue was that they couldn't place where the cause was. Few knew it, but he was one of the village's best sensors, at least when trying. Not many could evade his focus. Yet there was a being, one powerful enough to easily match a Kage, spreading their calming influence, but completely capable of hiding their location at the same time. He couldn't even place the direction of influence, not even the chakra signature itself. None had suddenly spread about the village, vibrated in recognition of its owner, or had any other indication that this person was emitting their power. The slow constant of appearing Anbu and Jounin within his office the past few minutes gave him little hope. If any had located the source, they would have informed him immediately. Even worse, there was not a single ping upon the village barrier that any significant chakra signatures had entered their walls. It was unsettling. Search for the stranger within our walls. I want the person responsible for this disturbance, brought directly to me, unharmed. On the other side of Konoha, two young girls were quietly making their way towards a familiar stand on the outskirts of the village. It had taken half an hour to subtly and quietly walk around to the more occupied and condensed area of the village, and in sight of the stone faces, but they were trying not to completely stand out. Obviously they still talked and laughed, not truly caring who saw them now, but they still knew they couldn't just hop around like ninja when nobody knew them. Miso. It has to be first. Even if she hadn't been the best student, many rules of the village were still quite obvious. An unknown child running across rooftops would bring attention of the ninja, and they would be brought in for questioning. They knew that with their changes, either being completely blonde anymore, would probably bring up even more questions, as well as solidifying that few would recognize her, if any could at all. Show you. It's been too long. They would be looking for the village pariah who had disappeared years before. Right. But wouldn't they be looking for twins, either of which were completely blonde, nor had visible whiskers scars? Miso is our favorite. Even though their clothes were slightly off material-wise, it wasn't so obvious as the little cat-eared hoods they wore, which took the focus of the villagers that laughed at the bickering twins passing by. All ramen is our favorite. But we haven't had soy since before see? We had miso the last few times. She pouted. Their back and forth arguments, along with the hoods, had kept anyone from taking a closer look at the twins' feet. If looking at just the right angle, a shadowed point could be seen swaying back and forth underneath slightly. Even then, it gave too little to be worth investigating why it was there, even if it had been seen. It doesn't matter. We haven't had any for so long that it should still be miso. This continued on until they were already halfway across the village. Neither had noticed the strange increase of shinobi and kunoichi frantically hopping about the roofs. Even more, too caught up in their ramen battle, they hadn't noticed the quiet squeal that had found the pair. Kaya! Getting tackled to the ground, the twins couldn't help but cry out in surprise. Looking at each other, they blinked in mimic surprise before looking back at the cause. A while earlier, a little girl was flowing through several taut motions, repeating them until exhaustion. Or she would have, had the presence not suddenly been felt. Looking over at the elder that had been watching her, she saw his eyes wide. Before she even realized it, there was nobody within the dojo. A smile quickly found its way into her face as she realized just what this presence was. Unlike everyone else, she had met the source, felt the actual chakra, and was able to connect the two. Little did anyone realize, but the chakra that the presence was spreading through had been leaking throughout the village for years. With it so large and powerful, it was quite simple to follow it to the source. And with the majority of the Hyuga suddenly on alert for the source, she simply had to walk out the gates to leave her compound. The rest of the village, no matter the clan, still hadn't quite connected the two together. Even Byakugan users skipped over the recent influx of nature-attuned chakra that had slowly been increasing. Had a single person connected the two, it wouldn't have been so difficult. The very nature of the two separate occurrences should have been simple to connect together. As it is, everyone overlooked the long increasing presence, and instead looked for a sudden large chakra signature that would be exuding massive waves of energy. Of course, no such person existed. The source wasn't putting out any chakra, but merely walking through an area that didn't have a natural filter, like the Senju clan grounds did. And Hinata, despite not understanding this, was still capable of following the small trail of chakra to its source. Although not quite recognizing the pair in their new yukata, the ears quite easily marked who they were. Happy she found the two, having been unable to go back to meet them again since the festival, it shouldn't be surprising she jumped them. Though if it was anyone that knew her, they would declare such an event jaw-dropping. Even if she had only spent a single night with the pair, barely knowing each other, she knew their easy attitudes would overlook her behavior. They treated each other far rougher, after all. It also helped that she was still quite childish, and hadn't yet had too many terrible and morally detrimental experiences quite yet. It was also how she saw the pair interacting during their first meeting. Funa! Haruna! Hinata giggled at their faces, when turned to her in disbelief. They grinned, though, when they realized who it was. That turned to confusion an instant later. The brunette gently pulled herself from the pair, only now realizing what she had done. Ah! I am so sorry. Getting up, dusting themselves off, the twins looked even more confused at the bowing girl. It's okay. We're happy to see you too, the other finished. Hinata straightened up, looked between them, then giggled a little again. Still doing it, they smiled, but they were still confused. We never got her name. Naruto turned towards her sister, who returned a similar look at the statement. Yeah. And she called us something? Hinata's eyes widened dramatically. I am so sorry. My name is Hyuga Hinata. She bowed once more. Please forgive and my manners. There's nothing to forgive? Naruto replied, even more confused. Naruto just nodded along. Want to come have some ramen with us? Her happy tone wasn't overlooked. I would love to. Hinata's heart jumped at the invitation. She hadn't been invited to anything before. She was barely allowed to socialize with anyone outside the clan. Smiling in response, they each grabbed a hand and started pulling her towards God's Kitchen Ichiraku Ramen. 3 girls quickly found themselves upon seats within a small stall. I can't wait. It's been so long. Yeah. Wait, we still didn't decide. A look of horror passed the yukata-clad girls. The other mirrored her reaction. But I thought we were getting miso? I'd like miso too. Is that alright, Funa? She glanced at the twins, questioningly, before letting out an eep when both twins suddenly turned towards her. No matter how comfortable she'd gotten to the pair so quickly, having 2 pairs of slitted cat or fox eyes turned towards you like that was intimidating, at least for a shy, unconfident girl. You called her Funa? Naruto furrowed her brows cutely in thought. Why? The other finished, mimicking her sister's expression. Hinata blushed furiously. Ayano, I'm sorry. I don't know why your names, but I didn't just want to keep wondering. But why? The ice wielder asked again. Yeah? Funa Fuyu no Hana Winter's flower. Haruna Haru no Hana Spring's flower. Or simply I think they suited you both? Hinata finished, uncertainly. Having heard the reasoning, the sisters turned towards each other with wide eyes. Those names, they're pretty, and they really do suit us, but what about Naru? And Narua? I don't even think Narua means anything, said Owner pouted at her name. Stop giggling. It's not funny. It took a few seconds to stifle her internal giggling, and outward shakes of held in laughter. Sorry. Okay. It would also be better than our names. We don't want Gigi to find us either. Our names, I saw we use her names. I really like them too, yeah. At least when we look like foxes. Our orders? The voice broke the girls from their mental chat. Surprised, they looked at the old man and smiled brightly. To their side, their new friend was looking at them oddly, but they ignored that. We'd like miso ramen. The twins chorused. Me too. The quiet voice was almost missed, but having run the place so long, the man hadn't missed it. Alright, 3 miso coming right up. He turned and left, giving a cursory glance at the twins before shaking his head, as if to clear it. Ayano? Looking between each other, they ended their unknown chat, then smiled brightly at their friend. You can call us that if you want. We really like it. More than what we were called before. What you were called before. Hey. But I like mine too. Humph. Yeah, thank you. Hinata got slightly dizzy turning back and forth between the two as their voices echoed on either side of her. Kia! The twins looked down at their friend, who had somehow fallen off her stool, before giggling. Hinata returned to her seat, blushing, just as their meal arrived. Here, best I can make, as deserved by beautiful little flowers. This only intensified Hinata's blush, as he referenced her name as well Sunflower along with her new friends' names. Obviously he had overheard, though made no mention of such. Instead he focused on the other two girls, placing them as twins by a simple glance. He knew their drooling faces were familiar, but couldn't place it. The cute hoods and hair covered too much to make any true guess, and they hadn't introduced themselves, instead going with what were more like nicknames. Being in a ninja village, a person can't help but pick up a few traits of them too. The pair were just off. But everything pointed to them being completely harmless. Before anyone knew it, the twins had finished their meal with bliss written across their faces. Hinata had only halfway finished, but was obviously unable to eat more. Ichiraka could tell when someone didn't finish because they didn't like it, rather than simply being unable to eat. So good Naruharina moaned out. Yen Naruafina mimicked. The other two sweat drop at the blissfully content girls. Their sighs gave away the fact they wanted more, but they suddenly stilled. Slowly they turned towards one another. Ichiraku, though observing only half the time it was rude to stare, could easily pick out the reason why. More than that, he could tell when the reason was purposeful or deceitful. The shared shock and horror upon the twins' faces told him the truth. Which was quickly confirmed. We don't have any money, Haruna whispered. We don't have any money. Funa echoed louder. Hinata once more looked between the two. She was surprised, but having seen where they lived, knew it was probably something she should have expected. Ayano. She tried, but a bit too quietly. So either of you can pay, huh? Ichiraku, despite being a kind and gentle man, normally wouldn't allow someone to eat for free, not without good reason. His expression was neither kind, nor dangerous, but still allowed it to stay serious. Though for customers like these first-time customers, truly regretful, and thoroughly loved the meal, he would normally waive off the payment. But something was still bugging him. What do you expect to do? Comically, the twins hopped down, tears pouring out of their eyes, and kneeled into a position to beg forgiveness. Once more, Hinata's quiet attempt to gain attention had gone unheard. Well, unheard by the twins. Ichiraku was purposely focusing on the twins, who were praying and begging forgiveness now. He almost wanted to laugh. The meals themselves were only smalls, and usually free for children if an adult buys a meal. Though it seemed cruel, the girls still seemed to be niggling his mind for some strange reason. Glancing at the third child, no longer trying to get attention as she stared at her friends in disbelief, his eyes sparkled. If you spend an hour helping, cleaning dishes, I'll let it go. Yada! A moment later had the girls jumping for joy, hugging each other at the acceptance and forgiveness, though more in comfort of each other as emotions struggled to break out. It wasn't so much the fact that they were allowed to work it off so much as being forgiven and accepted, once again, even after wronging him, by one of the few people that had done so before. A man they never wanted to push away, and almost accidentally might have. Hinata was still disbelief while the stall owner just chuckled at the children. He could remember several who were just as expressive. Alright, you two, follow me to the back. He looked at the third, almost regretfully at her sudden sad expression. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea? They seemed to have only just made friends. Still, his gut instincts were telling him this needed to be done. I will charge the Hyuga account, Hinata-sama. If you can, you may return in an hour to meet your friends. It won't take long, she nodded sadly. Ko will probably be looking for me soon. Her tone made it sound like she didn't want to return, which made the Tuchi's heart clench. For some reason he felt like he was splitting up a friendship before it even started now. You can watch if you want. Maybe chat while they work? He sighed in relief as the girl eagerly nodded. He had enough room for all three, with how small they were, but it was still going to be crowded. Come along you two, let's get you started. Hyuga Hinata was shivering, though it seemed she could burst out in laughter just easily as screaming out in terror. The tilt was centered, hence her shivering. Ichiraka Tuchi was stoically stilled. It was unclear of his thoughts, though it might also be that he was passed out standing up. There just wasn't any way to tell. Two little causes were balled up, trembling, soaked with dirty soap water and broth of various types, covered in noodles, vegetables, and a myriad of various tidbits needed to make ramen. It was unclear as to what happened, but there was something distinctly wrong with the entire situation. Needless to say, but the twins were the central cause of it all. There were pots dumped and spread all about, utensils broken or stuck in walls, and a myriad of random damages everywhere about the kitchen. Taking a closer look at the true reason for such reactions from the two, one would only have to take a closer look at the twins themselves. Despite being covered in so much, It was quite easy to understand, should one have been born within Konoha. The shivering twins were literally balled up. Peeking out from between a few of the tails, the girls were awaiting a reaction more than silence. They hadn't meant to cause any damage. They had even tried to fix it before their Tochijizan saw. That obviously hadn't worked, and then somehow he saw one of the girl's ears, and then the other's tail got loose while trying to hide with her sister, which ended up causing more damage, and eventually they just wanted to disappear, which resulted with all 9 tails appearing to wrap around the girls as they curled up inside. All in all, they truly didn't even know what happened themselves. They had just wanted to fix things and hide. Neither had wanted any of this to happen. Hinata was no crying for some reason, which may have been reflected by the twins who were trying and failing to hold back their own, though the laugh/fear mixture was still present on Hinata's face. It was hard to figure her out, but the stall owner had yet to visibly react just as one of the twins looked towards the door in hopes that maybe they could just run away. That temporary thought was crushed. Explain. Despite the situation, the trouble the girls brought, and the twins themselves, and even himself, he could still understand that the children, all of them, were completely distraught. He himself was slightly scared, but considering the girl reactions, felt any fear dissipate. No matter their form or possible relation, he could see they hadn't meant to cause trouble. That didn't mean he was going to let them off easy. Eep. Shivering, they couldn't help their unnatural fear. This was one of, if not the only person left the twins felt they could trust. But this man didn't know them. Not here. Not in this time. They had disappeared before meeting him. We're SS sorry. The twins hid further within their tails, ears so flat against their heads they appeared non-existent, and nearing the point of sobbing uncontrollably. Ichiraku's hardened eyes softened slightly at the small terrified voices. No matter what he's looking at now, he had seen how the girls had interacted, how they were obviously hiding something, and how they were visibly showing remorse. More than that, he could see they were terrified of his reaction to their special traits. Finally, he sighed. Okay, we'll go over this from the beginning. For now, just calm down. Why you won't tell on us? You won't turn us in? You won't tell the Hokage? Tucci looked into the hopeful eyes of the frightened twins he had originally hoped were originally playing a prank. As much pain as it was to see something like them, as much as he hoped that what he had heard from the rumors wasn't true, as much as he wanted to deny what he was seeing, the pain man couldn't. But he also couldn't deny that, when ignoring their unique features, what he was seeing was 2 simple children, seemingly afraid for their lives, which they believed depended on his decision, which could very well be truth. That depends on the 2 of you. The shiver he saw was more telling than anything. Whatever the reason, they put stock in what he said. He really didn't know why, but they seemed to take everything about him seriously. Honestly, the damage wasn't even all that terrible. Though it looked bad, there was hardly any damage or loss. The stock was fine, and so were the important areas and tools. Everything was superficial, worth maybe a few hours' work to fix, and a day or 2 of profit. Come on, you 2. Quit hiding. His final words held a slight warmth, which differed from everything previous. It was just enough to calm the twins enough to do so. Looking at each of them, it was obvious they were actually crying. Nodding, they followed his order, and pulled their tails behind them and into a single fluffier tail, poking through a small tear in their yukata. A dark feeling came from Ichiraku again, causing them to shiver and look back at him with fear. It wasn't so much that it was dark, or how dark it was, but the fact that the anger was directed at the 2 of them. Shakily, but quickly, the 2 knelt in front of him in Saiza, not wanting to feel it longer or darker than they had to. They would do anything to make it disappear from their Jisan. Thankfully, he had already put a sign out telling people he had taken the rest of the day off. The man had more important matters to take care of, obviously. Tucci waited for the tails to disappear, but they merely dawdled for a few moments, staring at each other. As soon as he was going to tell them to hide it too, his patience shortening quickly, they looked up at him in fear and quickly sat as if awaiting punishment, trembling even more. Despite the confusing timing of their reaction, he ignored it. Why is there still a tail still visible? He saw them look at each other, as if having a secret conversation, which they probably were. Many ninja tend to do such. Seeing shinobi doing this was one thing, but for children to do so was a bit unsettling. He looked over at the Hyuga heiress to see her slowly calming down. At this point, she seemed more scared for her new friends than of them. He felt like he knew why, but ignored it for now. We can't hide the last tail or our ears. One of the twins spoke up fearfully, voice shaky. They had to have hid it within their yukata, if that was the case. What are your names? And I don't mean what Hinata-sama named you. He noticed the 2 looking at each other once more, and frowned. No silent speak. The trouble girls looked up at him with wide disbelieving eyes. Their flat ears went even flatter as they looked down, if that was possible, which apparently was. Sorry, Tochijizan, they chorused together. And my name is Naru. And Nara? Now he wasn't a ninja, but he knew when something wasn't adding up. They knew his personal name, not just his family name, which he rarely gave out. And the second twin's response seemed even stranger. He'd leave that for later though. But the similar names had given him even more to think about. And it wasn't just of these two girls. No family name? He watched as their trembled forms turned shaky. Obviously, they were frightened beyond belief at the mere mention. Then they looked at Hinata, simultaneously, then back to him. Obviously this was something that was quite sensitive. Do you not trust her? Seeing their wide eyes, he knew there was far more to this than even he could think of. Though that wasn't unusual with ninja affairs. The ramen owner may have believed they were the Kyuubi itself, given new form, if there was merely one of them. They had 9 tails, and fox ears, and had an apparent age that led one to believe they could be born the night of the attack. But there were 2 of them, young, human in form, and definitely not feeling dangerous. He waited for the 2 to come to a decision, even allowing them silent talk. We're not sure? But maybe we could try. She hasn't once felt like the others since we met. So maybe she won't tell anybody? We don't really have anywhere to run to if she does, though. They looked at each other, shivering, their ears twisting and turning in emotional reflections. But if we don't, she might tell? What do we do? No, I won't tell anyone. I promise. The shy and quiet girl turned determined after getting their attention and a moment's pause. I promise, she almost whispered, but still without stutter and completely confident. Feeling nothing dark from her, they nodded. They still felt the dark feelings from Tsuchijizan, but they couldn't fault him. They could only believe in him. And hope. My name is Uzumaki Naru, the original said as her sister nodded. Tuchi's eyes would have gone comically wide at their response, if he hadn't been expecting it somehow. His anger welled up again as he realized something was wrong with this entire situation. Suspiciously wrong and off. Something, everything, was just too strange. He needed more answers. He saw the relief in the girls as his anger died down some more, and only just realized they had nearly started crying again the instant he got angry. But he hadn't let his feelings show on his face, or had he? He needed more information. This wasn't just some simple situation. How old are you? We're not really sure? They looked at each other frowning. Maybe 14? No, remember? Oh yeah. So maybe 5? Or 6? We don't really know. That threw the man through a loop. 14? 5 or 6? They looked almost 6, 7 at the absolute most. When was your birthday? October 10th, 6. Now he knew for certain it was true, yet still wrong. He had met Kushina's child recently, and had actually started feeding him when the ill-looking redhead came by, tired and hungry. Even going so far as to charge the price of 1 bowl for multiple. Show me your faces. The worried looks reappeared, but the twins quickly complied, pulling the slightly curled hair from their cheeks. Seeing the whiskers on their cheeks, an exact match to the face of the Uzumaki recently coming around, had him convinced of their relation. There really was something more going on. Where are your parents? Their expressions could break hearts. It was a face that showed such a concept was foreign. A face of those who had never felt the love of a mother, the protection of a father. A face that was more confused than saddened. It was the face of an orphan. He quickly retracted his question. Never mind. Do you know why you have such special features? Their trembling started up again. He didn't know why, but it seemed this was a touchy subject. But this needed to be answered. We were told that we are the Kaikyubi's reincarnation? Tears fell across the whiskers of both trembling children. Tuchi sighed. He couldn't guess as to how the girls obtained their features, but he knew from everything he'd seen that what they were told wasn't true. Especially with the Sandaime Hokage's word about what actually happened that night. Who told you this? Both girls looked even worse at that question. Someone bad. He used me. Lied to me, tried to kill me. So we ran from him. He was a bad man. Both nodded fiercely at this. Tuchi sighed tiredly. Then why believe his words? This shocked the girls. Why had they believed him? But what are they then? His explanation made perfect sense. Why else would they look part fox? Why could they easily transform into one? They looked towards each other, shocked, confused, terrified. Then what am I? Tuchi had seen the late Yondaime sealing up ramen within a scroll for his pregnant wife several times. Though not versed in ninja arts, he could still see the truth, or at least understand similar concepts when explained. This was all still strange, but maybe they had been affected by the beast's chakra or something? Either way, he knew one entity couldn't become another. Chakra concepts were beyond him, but he knew that much. Ramen sealed in a scroll didn't make the scroll ramen. And a demon, or maybe just some of its chakra, was probably sealed within the girls. He couldn't outright say Naruto's condition, but he could ask questions. What happens when you seal a kunai within a scroll? They looked up in confusing. It gets sealed within? Does the scroll become the kunai? The balding man continued. And no? The other twin answered. And if another person touches you with chakra, do you turn into them? No? I don't think so, right? Of course not. The last came from Hinata, surprisingly. So if the Kyuubi touched you, or was sealed within you, would you turn into the fox? All 3 girls shook their heads. Tuchi still didn't know what had happened to the twins, or was it triplets now, to make them this way, but from everything he'd seen, learned from the Yondaimes and Kushina's many visits to his stall, and heard from the 3rd Hokage himself soon after the attack, then the beast was sealed within another child, unable to influence anyone outside of it. Whatever these two girls were, it wasn't a demon fox. They didn't even seem to know what they were. Trust me, either of you are the QB. Not that I have any clue as to why you look as you do. Haruna and Fiona, Naru and Narua looked at one another, a strange expression on either face, though perfectly reflected by the other. The scroll! Both suddenly shouted, before turning back towards Tucci. We didn't look like this before, instead we were perfectly normal, but we did still have the whiskers, and it was only until we used the forbidden seal that we changed. He subtly eyed Hinata swaying in her chair from the back and forth talking of the twins. Still, this just added more questions. Somehow it felt less like he was scolding children, trying to figure out what to do with them, and more like he was piecing a puzzle together. But he knew now that he was right, that these girls were truly human, or used to be? It's all questionable at this point, but there wasn't much use in speculating. It wasn't really that important anyways, Tucci decided. Though he knew otherwise, it wasn't something they'd be able to figure out. Why don't you want the Hokage to know? Tucci shivered at the temperature drop within the room. The dull look upon the twins' faces told him all he needed to know, but he got an answer nonetheless. We don't trust him. He says one thing then does another. Or he doesn't do anything at all when he should. Even though he's the leader, he won't help us. He should have, no, he had to have known, or maybe ordered it himself. He won't help us. Especially now. Even if he tries, he probably wouldn't help. If he even could, or would at least, either thought so. Their words and tone made it sound like they knew the Hokage well. Whatever had happened between the two children and the village leader had somehow burned any bridges between them. Somehow they had been able to hide, and soon after became part fox, and they didn't trust the man with their newest secret. It was a generalized idea hypothesized from their words, but as much as he was likely to get. Was it just him, or was the room still cold? Any relation to Uzumaki Naruto that you know of? He almost wanted to laugh at the mirroring tilt of their heads, still partly covered in noodles. If his kitchen wasn't a mess, and the situation so serious, he probably would have chuckled at the sight. Naruto? Wait, did you say Uzumaki? Uzumaki Naruto? There's someone else with our name? Their surprise gave him his answers. Strange though that the three children of Kushina, did she really have triplets? He thought it was a single child hadn't known of each other. Uzumaki Nara, he heard the last, though merely a whisper. It seemed they too had noticed the similar naming style. Though he had realized it earlier, their relationship was becoming more and more obvious as siblings. Naruto, Naru, and Nara. It was the biggest reason he had let up so much, as well as refused to believe the twins were the demon fox reincarnated. All three had such similar personality traits to Kushina, not to mention the obvious resemblance to their parents. We have a brother? They exclaimed quite loudly, fully of hope. Neither had heard of him before. Actually, if Tucci had known of this boy before the incident, why hadn't he said anything? Everything was weird. Were they wrong to trust him too? But he said it now, so maybe he just hadn't known before? It was all so confusing. Hi, I've started helping him out lately. He has straight red hair down to his chin, blue eyes, looks a little feminine, kind of like the both of you, and even has whiskers on each cheek. He gauged their reactions, before deciding they hadn't known about this either. If this was true, then they really did have reason to mistrust the Hokage. He smiled sadly. Come on, let's clean up. Don't worry about hiding your features inside the kitchen. Nobody will see them back here. We'll keep them a secret, right, Hinata-sama? The twins turned to the third girl in shock, completely forgetting her. But seeing her nod, they smiled, new tears sprouting, this time of happiness. Thank you both. Really thank you? Alright, enough. Get to work cleaning your mess. The ramen stall owner scolded sternly. The scramble of children followed a short instant later, except with 3 girls instead of 2. He hadn't meant for that reaction, but shrugged it off with a small smile. 3 Uzumaki, things are definitely going to get interesting. Hi's quiet mutter, whether amused or fearful, he himself couldn't tell, went unnoticed in the clanging of the cleaning scatter. Here, put this on the top shelf. Eh? But doesn't it? Yeah, but not this time. It needs to be out of the way for now. Hi. Then put this over K. You should probably heat up another pot. Huh. But we're out of it. 3 small salt ramen. 2 pairs of slitted eyes turned towards the shop owner and nodded understanding. See? Need more. Hi. The ingredients are ready. Good work, girls. The twins looked at each other with large smiles, before turning back. Arigato gozaimasu Tucci-san. You can go for the day. I'll take care of the rest. Hi. The 2 chirped happily. Fiona pulled her apron off, slid her tail back into her yukata, and pulled her hood back over her head. Looking over, she saw Haruna had similarly hidden her features. Ready? Haruna nodded. Let's go back. Heading out the side of the building, the twins made way past many people. They'd only been at it for a few days, but they were truly enjoying themselves helping their Ji-san. They'd even seen Ayam come by once. She was apparently going to the academy still, so she wouldn't be able to help during the day like they were used to. It took some time, but they had eventually made their way back into the forest. Naru, Haruna, didn't know whether it was sad or not, But their home, a hole in the ground, was far more comfortable than anywhere they'd lived before the incident. A bed of flowers, in a cavern hidden from the world, in a forest that few traverse, was a far more pleasant home than an apartment with a mangy bed, surrounded by villagers that scorned her very existence. Though it may have something to do with the sister they had gained in each other. Back in Konoha Tower, Hiruzen was grimly looking out his window. Once more, the presence had dissipated. It had already been more than 2 weeks since its appearance. They had yet to find the source. The sensors couldn't find anyone pumping out enough chakra to cause such a constant effect in so short a time. They would have noticed it. His only relief was that the pressure itself held no threat as it made itself known daily. In fact, most of the force had nearly forgotten it by now. The fact that it was a pleasant sensation had dulled their need to find it. Only those more sensitive to chakra could still outright sense it, and only sensors themselves are still actively looking for the person capable of outputting such incredible amounts without fatigue. Whatever this person was capable of, it was far more than he. At this point, the second god of shinobi was actually afraid of whatever they'd find. Afraid they would come across this person and turn his or her pleasant presence into something far more terrifying pressure. While he would be capable of doing something similar, it would only be for a short time. Nowhere near the weeks of constant use that had shaken the man. He sighed as it almost completely disappeared. Instead of searching for the source of the chakra, he's had his force search for a person who is walking about at certain times of the day. Specifically within the time frame that the presence appears and dissipates. The morning is more random, but the evening time is relatively the same. So far there's been no luck. The timing fits more than half the village. Meanwhile, a certain Hyuga girl sighed sadly. Once more, she flowed through the stiff kata of the gentle fist style. And once more, was stiffly and harshly told to do it again. Ever since sneaking out, she had her routine forcibly doubled up. Every day she had fallen in bed, exhausted, with little to no time together with her baby sister. She could feel her friends coming out every day, and terribly wanted to meet them again. The way they had parted was frustrating. Somehow, Kyubi's chakra had altered their bodies into something different. Though it was really cute, especially their faces when petting their fur. It's like they really were part fox. Though they probably kind of were. She couldn't help but blush, realizing she was fantasizing about petting them. Focus! Hinata eeped at the stern shout from the elder. Once more, she followed the given directions on her taijutsu. One more day of harsh practice, one more day of exhaustion. It would be obvious she couldn't run off alone if she were too tired to do so. After the Kumo incident when she was 4, it would be problematic if she ran away only to get kidnapped again. It was going to be a long month of punishment. Come on, Nei-chan. Just one more step. You say that like it's easy. I still can't believe you stayed up all night to do this without just a gloat. The plant user complained. She frowned at the following giggle. You do know this means war, right? But it was just a joke. Funa/Narua quickly countered. Fufu, pranks come in all forms. You prank me, I prank back. Her foxy smirk widened as she ran forward and up the tree without hands. Her bare feet trekked halfway up, to just below her sister's branch. At the last instance before slipping, she managed to touch the limb, then allowed gravity to work. Ahaha! Not close, Inoike. Feeling something slipping around her foot, Funa frantically tried to jump away, only to get stuck in midair and fall. Unsurprisingly, she ended up suspended under the large branch a couple meters down. She crossed her arms and pout as she hung there, knowing escape would be tough in such a situation. Told you, Haruna/Naru stated, satisfied. Now you can hang tight while I finish up. Though it had taken weeks to get most of the way up the overly large trees, it was already in the final stretch. And if her sister finished overnight, then she should be capable of it by the end of the day. Her sister can wait until then. Tu-chan. Are those real? A sweet voice came from the doorway. All movement froze at the voice. Twin slits turned towards the source, causing the girl to flinch slightly. All fear quickly dissipated, leaving the two smiled brightly. Of course they're real. Do you want to see? We don't mind, so long as you don't tell anyone. Go on, you all can take a break. It's slow right now. The male voice outside called in. Closing the door, Ayam watched the swaying tail of a twin, mesmerized by the large appendage. Before she knew it, the fluff was already within her grasp, and a hand stroking through it. Or so she thought. It took a few moments to realize her hands were stroking a fuzzy ears upon a child's head. Ah, but I wanted to be first. The dismayed voice went unheard by the other two, both in bliss from the feeling of fur, or melting from gentle ministrations. Soon a smirk found its way upon her face. Turning around, a blonde tail swayed in front of the brown-haired girl's face. A small whine told her of her success, then she too followed in the melt of pleasure. Before she knew it, Ayam was petting two of the softest furry heads and tails she had ever had the pleasure of touching. Similarly, the two under her ministrations were in a world of their own. The only comparison was their first friend, but they hadn't seen her in a while. Despite knowing from experience what feels best along their fur, it seemed neither twin was capable of truly pleasuring themselves or sister. Cough, startled, three girls jumped and looked towards the ramen god, trying to hide the red creeping upon their faces. I could use a bit of help, if you three don't mind? Though he looked like he had sinned by interrupting the girl's enjoyment, he had a small backup of customers outside. Though rare, it was one of the few days Ayam had time to help her father. Trying to force their blushes away, 3 girls scrambled to do as asked. Are you really going to do this? You know it will hurt. Despite the words, her face was showing excitement at the thought. And I know you're going to be following me not long after. Haruna looked down at the water over 15 meters below. Over 10 times their own height down. While it doesn't look terrible, a fall like that nearly makes water seem like rock. Well, at least I'll get to see if it's really worth the experience before I do. The obvious pout followed. But instead of a reply, Haruna merely released the chakra flowing into her feet, allow her body to drop. She rearranged herself to be feet first. Splash! Fiona watched in apprehension for a moment, then sighed in relief as a figure quickly emerged. A second later, she had released her chakra hold and allowed gravity to take her. 1 second, 2, and splash! The pain felt was far worse than she figured. Haruna had quickly come out, but had obviously hid what she felt from her face. Though she felt nothing broken, having slightly stronger bodies than they used to, it still hurt for a few moments. Soon enough the damage had healed up and she headed towards the surface. Why you spent a while down there? Haruna stated matter-of-factly. I know it hurt, but I thought you'd come out quickly, like I did. Fiona, not seeing anything smugness or other abject expression upon her sister's face, pushed her previous thoughts away. It wasn't true, apparently. Maybe Haruna had simply got out quickly to avoid her fall. Yeah, that hurt. Let's not do that again if we can help it, she pleaded, thankfully getting a nod. Hey girls, prepare for a large batch. Confused eyes turned towards their employer. Why do you feel so sad? And why do you need a large batch for a single person? Girls don't eat that much here, and there's only one out there. We already have enough ready. Tucci let them ramble on for a moment. Girl? The kid outside eats a lot and probably needs it. Despite themselves, the two nodded. They knew there were some capable of eating vast amounts of food quickly, themselves included, but so far they hadn't come across any while helping. This was a first. Quickly, they had started up a few batches of ingredients as their Ji-san prepared and made the ramen itself. He stopped before walking out, and glanced at the 2 girls helping. Though they only got a bowl a day, if they did eat, which was all the twins asked for in return for helping, they had thoroughly enjoyed helping about the kitchen. Their work was enough to pay for several large bowls a day, but they had declined, even after paying the man back. There was a bigger reason for helping, and he knew it too. He was sure they would have still helped, regardless. Don't let him see you, and don't follow him around, especially if you want to stay hidden from the Hokage. But you both should take a look at this customer when you get a chance. Glancing at each other, now even more confused, the twins followed Tucci to the door, quickly donning their hoods and hiding their tails. They had changed the yukata to have a whole flap. It didn't look like it was even there until in use, but worked wonderfully. Obscured by sight, they listened to the sad voice as it replied to being unable to buy so much ramen, only to be rebutted by a sale that day. The happy cries of the child were nearly heartbreaking. It reminded them of their time getting ramen in similar ways, and how they had felt and acted. Finally, when Tucci-jizan moved back a little, they saw the reason. The Uzumaki that Tucci had told them about. Straight red hair, blue eyes, whiskered cheeks. The girls slid back into the kitchen with wide eyes. That's not me. No, Nara looked back at her original, though she still felt just as real. That's not right? Shouldn't she should have blonde hair? But if that's not me, then where am I? I don't know. Maybe she really is us? Me? Just with her hair dyed. We'll think about it later. For now, let's just believe that she's us, but with red hair. I don't know why she's dressed like a boy, but she's definitely. Yes, she's me, you, us? So confusing. She pouted for a second before returning to the situation. Why did Tucci-jizan tell us not to be seen? I don't know, but there must be a reason. Still, we have her scent, and can find her. Sniffing the air, Haruna mimicked her sister. Over the time within the forest, they'd quickly learned that others were tracking them by smell, and started adapting to it when they learned it was possible. Though they couldn't go too detailed, they were both capable of memorizing specific people or animals. It's similar, but still so different. But we smell kinda like fox, right? Yet Tucci-jizan doesn't want us to be seen then. We'll just have to do it another way. They mirrored foxy smirks. A lone child was walking down the road, ignoring her grumbling stomach. The surrounding people were often glaring or completely ignoring her again, but this was normal. She smiled as the instant ramen within her shopping bag was once again on her mind. It wasn't often that she went shopping, but every time she did, they had cheap ramen. Everything else cost more than her entire allowance usually, so she was glad there was some available today. Of course it was similar everywhere else. She would be sad that she couldn't afford anything herself, but knowing that you don't have parents to provide, she had long since gotten over this. With her apartment in sight, she smiled. Though it wasn't big, and nobody else living there, it had been her home for as long as she could remember, though she wished the masked men would start coming again. It was lonely otherwise, not that any of them talked. What is with them anyways? She couldn't help but think they were more like sticks in mud whenever around. No reactions, no words, no anything. But they did at least help out. She cut herself off before going deeper into what others had that she didn't. Just as she was about to take a step up the stairs, a sound echoed off the walls. It was strange, because she'd never heard anything like it. A scratch and thump, but from where? She looked around to find nothing visible. Then a small sniffing sound caught her attention. Leaning over, she peered under the stairs. Narumi blinked at the slitted eyes that seemingly glowed within the dark. Strangely, the creature's eyes followed her own as she tilted her head at the strangeness of it all. Was it a cat? What are you doing here? Obviously a cat wouldn't understand her words. Seeing as the hiding animal wasn't moving, she assumed this one wouldn't either. Wonder what you're hiding from, her brows furrowed. This time, the cat did respond. She watched the glowing eyes close the gap between them. A golden-furred kitty with the fluffiest tail she had ever seen came out from under the stairs. Kaya! Narumi landed on her bottom, rubbing her now wet face. The unexpected lick had surprised her more than anything. Never before had an animal allowed her so close, let alone shown anything but fear. Her wide eyes just watched as the kitty tilted its head, obviously confused. Then she noticed the twin red stripes that coursed along its back. See cute. Kya! What's with you? She caught the kitty as it jumped into her chest, licking her face again. Huffing, Narumi glared at the animal, before that quickly turned into the brightest smile anyone could have seen on her features in years, and started scratching the kitty behind its ears. You really like me, huh? The purring response made her giddy, and she caressed the kitty in with her free arm, while the other held it gently. Most animals run from me but not you. Maybe you'd like to be my friend? I don't really have one of those, you know? Tebane? The purring got louder, causing Narumi to giggle. Not even wondering if there was an owner to her new friend, she took the kitty up the stairs with her weekly allowance of ramen cups. A black mask-wearing figure slid into the not-empty apartment after her ward. She had seen the entire event. She had seen every event from the morning on. This was normal, and while she wanted to interfere, was forbidden. There were no laws broken, no physical abuse, and no cause for interference. It was only her duty to protect, not to interact. As per duty, she watched the fox suspiciously. Though unable to tell what it was, she did know it was physically there. No henge, genjutsu, nor any form of deception was apparent. Though the fox felt strange, she couldn't place it. For a moment she felt a strange déjà vu, like there was a feeling she was missing. It felt natural, somehow, kind of like nature. Maybe even exuding the chakra the forest had been doing lately, but tossed the idea away. Why would a fox feel like the forest? But tossing the forest chakra out, she couldn't feel anything else from it, just like any normal fox. Basically, there wasn't anything suspicious aside from its random likeness of her ward, though there was a rumor of strange striped foxes within the forest. Maybe the reason it felt like the forest was because it actually lived there? That would make sense. But weren't there two? Well, so long as there wasn't any danger, then it was fine. Their unique appearance may have something to do with the Kyuubi's chakra. Maybe it had altered the kit somehow to give it such an appearance. That would also explain why the girl and fox had come across each other. Still, she would keep a watchful eye. That was her job, after all. What? Someone is watching her. I heard, but why? Did Tochijizan know? Funa? Narua? Narua? Narua, eek. What? You went quiet. Why yes, sorry? She's petting you, isn't she? So we're switching tomorrow, Databane. Eh? BBU. Nope. We're swapping. I wanna see her too. And it's better than trying things that hurt just to see what our bodies can do. Even if we need to find out what's different about our new bodies. I really don't want to do that stuff every day. Then we're going to keep swapping. Fine, but remember, nothing too dangerous alone. No jumping from tall trees anymore. No holding breath underwater for minutes. No D. I get it. I get it. Now let me enjoy this. Funa looked back up at the smiling redhead, ignoring her indignant sister. This drew her attention, but nothing was said. Instead, she stretched up and licked again, causing the human to lightly shriek again. Despite not liking the taste, it wasn't necessarily bad. It just seemed natural to do. But the reaction was quite funny. Call her what you want, but a tricker and prankster she, both twins, remain. Ignoring the indignant huffs of the redhead, Narua looked towards the upper corner of the wall for a moment, before succumbing to she who still kept the blissful strokes rubbing along soft fur, causing Narua to lay her head back down to rest and fall into pleasured slumber. Wearily, the ANBU watched the fox. The fox turned its head back to stare at her, despite her near invisibility within the room. Worry turned to slight fear at this. It's nothing new that an animal could pick her out, but this was a red fox, and it had turned to look at her. Not just glance, sniff, and wander off. A red fox looked at her. She could only stay tensed as it turned its head and laid it back upon her ward's lap. The long-haired ANBU knew it was merely paranoia due to having seen the Kyuubi itself, but the fox still unnerved her, somehow. This was the second day another fox had shown up. A different fox, yet oh so similar. Different when it should be the same. She could safely say that this creeped her out. It was abnormal. Completely and terribly abnormal. Even more, It had the same twin pattern of colored stripes starting from its eyes, down the side of its face and back, that the other had. That's not to mention the familiar stripes that started from the same place, up to the tufts inside its ears, just like the QB had. Were they siblings? They had to be, though it could be the same fox, just with its color changed. That would be even worse though. Still, the first hadn't done anything, and this one was acting the same. So far there was no perceived threat. Just a confusing abnormality. It unsettled her though. Especially when it looked at her when her worry peaked. Those eyes showed intelligence. Though not uncommon, wasn't something comforting either. She knew the Inuzuka dogs were as intelligent as humans. This fox showed similar eyes to such dogs, but the fact that she remembered rumors about twin fox kits in the Senju forest removed any idea of shinobi, allied or foreign, of having likely set this up. For nearly 2 years, these two had been randomly appearing before children that wandered the forest. All evidence heard had pointed towards them being peaceful. But why were they outside the forest? She would report this, but somehow knew it would be overlooked as nothing more than coincidence. No matter how much curiosity those in charge might have towards the foxes, there was little to no evidence about a devious plot happening. Logic dictated that this might eventually happen in hindsight. NBU or not, the hair upon the back of her neck still stood on end from when that creature had looked at her. Not red eyes. That was all it took to finally realize she was overreacting. Logic rarely dictated emotion, but look through enough, and it might eventually affect it. Again, the fox felt like the Senju forest. No malevolent chakra, no red eyes, and a different shade fur with unique stripes. This wasn't the QB, nor was it even a piece of it, not that she'd ever heard of such a thing. Even if both had looked directly at her, it was just a fox. Though we're just foxes. I couldn't see the person watching us. Right. It was so weird. Do you think we had someone watching us too? If she's us, then probably. But for how long? I think I remember someone giving us food when we were really young. Me too, kind of. Haruna purred as the fingers slid down her back once more. I think I know why you didn't respond. Hee. Already putting you to sleep? Purr. Don't do that. It feels too weird in my head. And then I wonder if the other kitty will come back tomorrow? She like you. Haruna opened her eyes to look about the place. It was small, even for an apartment, but easily big enough for a lone child to live. A single room with a kitchen, resting area, and futon all fit within. This was the apartment she had seen so many times, and left behind from the future. She was nearly certain that this girl was her now. But why did she have red hair? Everything was just as she remembered seeing in the mirror years ago. Except the red hair. It was also shorter than either could ever remember it being. Just down to her chin, except for the shorter bangs, and she was wearing boys' clothes, a simple t-shirt and shorts. If either had picked up the scent, or knew beforehand by simply being the same person, they might have assumed she was a boy. Even Tsuchijizan didn't pick up on it. They could remember the Hokage giving them yukata when they were younger. Though they moved on to wearing that jumpsuit later on, since it was all she could afford in the clothes section when shopping. She couldn't depend on Gigi for everything. It did help keep the paint and stuff off when playing pranks, thankfully. Well, she'll see me tomorrow. Hey, I was thinking. Naruto paused, wondering if it really was a good idea. This girl was them from the past, so would she accept it? Hearing the rumbling vibration again, she decided it didn't matter. She hoped so. Let's swap out working with Tsuchijizan. I forgot. We haven't seen him since we started looking for her. No, I mean, oh ho, there you two are. I was wondering when you'd come back. Tucci smiled at the hooded twins. Almost been lonely during the day without you, with I am in the academy and all. Their smile faltered after being ushered into the back. Tucci almost didn't notice it, but when the two children didn't rush off, he knew something was eating the two. Are you both okay? Sharing a quick glance, Narua/Fiona nodded. Taking a deep breath, the other sister steeled herself. We would like you to help feed our sister. Both twins bowed. Their nervousness was apparent. Ichiraku raised an eyebrow. Don't I do that already? When you two are hungry, you're welcome to a bowl. You've already paid off your debt for destroying my kitchen last month, Naruto. We want any food that you might give us to go to her. Please? Neither raised her head. They just waited for a response. Sai, what about you two? We don't need to eat. But she does. Her stomach is always growling. She needs more. While we don't. We're fine, so please? After a long pause, the ramen chef sighed again. All right. If you two are sure you don't need any, then your work will go towards feeding your brother. Yada! Tucci smiled at the overexuberance of the girls. Though it had taken a few days, their work had improved drastically. It had allowed him some leeway during his job, as well as allowing him to serve more customers quicker. It was a small price to pay to feed them, or their sibling if they wished. But ramen isn't healthy to have every day. While I can give him what you work off, his body won't grow well without a proper diet. Wide eyes turned towards the food expert. Can't you just make a healthy ramen then? Yeah, there has to be something you can make for her. I suppose so. I'll have to get a few extra ingredients daily then. Their smiles were contagious. We'll see what I can create for the boy. You're awesome, Ji-san. The best. He chuckled at the hugs. He'd slowly grown accustomed to the fuzzy tails wrapping around his legs as they tried to tackle him from either side. Yeah, we can't thank you enough for helping out our sister, Tucci smiled, but he wondered who was teaching these girls? You should reference a boy as him, or he or brother. Huh! The mirrored sound on either side of him was dizzying. He kind of understood why Hinata-sama reacted as she did when they talked. But she's our sister? A girl? We can smell it. The response was unexpected. Uzumaki Naruto was a girl? How could that be? But if these two say so with such certainty, then who was he to refute it? Tucci couldn't be certain himself, but the kid did look a bit feminine, despite the ragged clothes. It brought up far too many questions, but gave him even more incentive to feed the child. I understand. Now, shall we get started? He happily watched as two scurrying girls happily flowed about the kitchen, preparing his ingredients for the day. This scene was a happy recurrence that he was slowly coming to enjoy. A small shadow could almost be seen as it slipped behind a wall. The hiding entity looked around in the slowly brightening daylight. Few people were about, but it was still too early to safely move around. Last time, several people had tried to corner her before she could get to the Hokage's tower, nearly succeeding. But that wasn't her destination this morning. Her stomach grumbled in protest at the mere thought of her reasons to be out. Not seeing anyone in along the road, she took off towards the next closest alley that was still hidden from anyone that she couldn't see before. Each change in location gave a slightly different perspective, and a different area of sight. She knew the furthest travel point from one alley to another, that still guaranteed safety. Another few shifts brought her into sight of the greatest place in her world, Ichiraku's ramen. The balding old man let her eat, didn't glare, actually talked to her, and was actually nice. He was the second person in her life to do more than ignore her existence, spit or glare in her direction, or simply curse her away. Smiling brightly, Narumi watched as two cute girls entered the back. She'd seen them enter a few times, but only just realized they were there to help the man fix food. The last time, she had actually tried it while they were there, hoping it wouldn't make her sick like other places did sometimes, when they actually allowed her to eat. The little redhead didn't know why, but she felt that people were the reason she felt bad, not just the food. And two new people helping make her favorite food upset her a little. But she tried it a few days before, and it still tasted the same. So she was going to try again. Just as the owner turned the sign, she fled under the flaps. A few times she had eaten there with others either sitting within, or people coming in as she was already there. Both times she felt that they left too quickly, and it was her fault. Despite the owner's rebuttal that it was fine when she asked, she could tell that it was her fault, and should avoid allowing it to happen. So she either came early morning or late night when nobody else would come. Her smile could light up even the sun as she watched the adult walk out the kitchen. Hey Ji-san, I have a little money. Think I could have a bowl of miso? Her excited voice was quiet, much different than usual, but she didn't want to draw attention while trying to hide her presence from others. Of course. How many would you like, Naruchan? Almost startled by the change in address and tone, she completely missed the thoughts of money or related thoughts. Just one? Her eyes just watched as the man nodded with a smile and walked back into the kitchen. Her mouth hung open, eyes still staring at the spot he disappeared through. Huh! It wasn't until a bowl was placed in front of her that she took notice of his return presence. Looking down, she nearly fell off the chair with a surprised squeal. This isn't a small. Man, I'll get started on another, just in case you want it. Make sure to take time to enjoy it. Narumi just stared at the disappearing man. Now almost totally freaking out, she looked down. The scent easily had her mouth watering in the short instant it had been in front of her. Drool quickly escaped her mouth. Her stomach started protesting again, and this time didn't stop. Soon enough, the craziness flew to the back of her mind, and she started shoving the holy food into her mouth. It wasn't until the third bowl was nearly depleted that she came back to herself. Seeing the fourth put in front of her, she almost thought of ignoring it in favor of asking her questions. Almost. Soon, it too had disappeared into her bottomless stomach. She leaned back in bliss, eyes glazed over from eating a full meal for once. Though they weren't the large bowls, they had been bigger than her usual. The sounds of footsteps outside broke her out of the dream, and her body tensed again. Thankfully it was just passing by the stand. Narumi sighed in relief at not driving a customer from the stand. Thank you, Aji-san. Narumi smiled, then dug her small hand into her shorts pocket. She realized she didn't have enough to pay for so much, and was obviously horrified at her actions. Don't worry about it, Naruchan. The gentle voice stopped her thoughts once more. She looked up at the man questioningly. It's already been paid for. Someone or two decided that you need to eat more, and is taking care of the cost. I can't name who, but don't worry about it, and come by every day if you can. Stinging sprung up in her eyes. Someone was paying for her. The Hokage was already giving her an allowance. And Ichiraku-san said it wasn't him. But who else could it be? She didn't know anyone else. Her lips trembled at the rare kindness, tears springing forth. Thank you. He waved it off. Don't thank me. It's their idea. I couldn't do this otherwise. Just come more often, will you? He left off that he probably could, but it would probably put his business under if he tried. The two helping him out really did allow him to take care of customers much easier, faster, and give them better service. Having people spread around the fact that he allowed the demon brat to eat at had really drained his business recently. So providing better quality service to pull them back was truly a godsend. It did help that the girl in question tried to avoid others when she realized it herself, but he couldn't blame her. Tell them thank you for me? She nearly sobbed out, but kept from breaking down. She had to get going soon. Otherwise she might cause problems. She dropped from the high stool with his nod of assent. Peeking between the flaps, she waited for a clear opening before dashing to a nearby alley. Narumi exited the other side and ran towards another, quickly doing the same. Finally, she started walking along the streets normally. For the rest of the day her thoughts kept flowing back to the chef's change and the random kindness given to her. Who knows, maybe she could meet the person someday soon. Then she would have a third precious person in her life. Run! 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 4 padded feet hurried as quickly as they could move across the road. Golden fur fluttered in the wind. A tail flitted back and forth to keep balance. Ears swiveled as they heard the quickened steps chasing after her. Kaya! I can't believe I took this day. What's wrong? I'm being chased. Stupid man won't give up. Run up a wall or something? Eyes glinting at the idea, the small fox-shaped girl quickly turned towards the nearest building before simply doing just that. Her pads left the dirt-covered road and up the wooden building. She could hear cursing below her as she continued up to the roof. As soon as she reached the top though, she almost regretted it. 2 rooftops away, a black figure had just leapt towards her direction. For quickly standing on end, Funa's heart froze at the incoming sight. A second later, the figure flew over her, completely ignoring her existence. Her body shivered, baffled at not getting attacked, captured, or any other possibility. Slowly, her puffed-out fur flattened. Looking behind her found nothing but the inner wall of the rooftop. Blinking owlishly, she followed it down to just underneath her feet. Yellow, the stupid roof is completely yellow. She felt like laughing, but the narrow mist kept her from doing so. Though it wasn't her exact shade, most of the roof was painted golden, with lumber spread about it. The shades produced by the unused wood, and reflecting yellow from the rest had somehow hidden her from sight. Moving across to the other side, she carefully walked down into another alley, and back into the darkness. More footsteps caught her attention, and she quickly hid underneath more trash and boxes. Once more, her purser flashed by, but without a goal within sight anymore. Black-tipped nose poked out from the hidey hole as the cursing grew distant. Finally got away. Oh, don't traverse the rooftops. Just don't, okay? Once more on her way, the golden fox followed her nose, her sharp eyes picking out the best places to hide and scamper to. Inexperience had her going back and forth to get further without being seen as dead ends kept popping up. But eventually she found her goal sitting alone in on a tree swing in the park. Unable to get close without being seen, the ice fox stayed in the surrounding shrubbery. Not knowing when the obvious sad child would be leaving, and not one for sitting still for too long, Funa darted from bush to bush, eventually ending up in the one closest in front of the redhead. She kept herself visible to the girl, but not to much else. The bush easily covered the sides and back, but not the front where she was purposefully attempting to garner attention. A child, though much further away than the redhead, turned towards her direction, and she easily slid back behind the leaves. Soon enough the child's attention was upon something else, and the golden fox was once more attempting to garner attention. Finally, the redhead shifted her gaze back in front of her, and away from the other children. Blue eyes noticed a tiny movement within a bush some ways from her, finding a color that should not be within the green. Her brows furrowed as she squinted. The moment happened again, and she got up from the swing. She kneeled in front of the plant, trying to make out the strangeness within. Kia! Once her face was close enough to the bush, a foxy face poked out so quickly she didn't realize what it was until she felt the wet lick against her cheek. Narumi blinked as she rubbed the wet spot. You! Her voice lit with happiness. You're back again. The fox leapt out of the bush and into the lap of her giggling sibling. Soon enough, Funa was drowning in the pleasure that is petting. Purring her approval, she nearly fell asleep to the bliss. Only when it stopped did she remember why she was looking so hard today. Unlike the last few weeks, where the twins would only show up around evening when their sister went back home, today she had a different goal. Leaping off her affectionate sister, Funa once more entered the bush. She didn't notice the pout of the redhead, but knew that she would want more attention. Darting out the side of the bush, the golden fox quickly disappeared into another. Looking back, she knew that Narumi had seen it, and patiently waited. Finally, the human got up and walked over. Once within reach, Goldfur once more darted to another bush, causing a deeper pout on her sibling's face. This continued until the Uzumaki in human form finally caught on, and started chasing the little fox. She didn't even realize that they'd eventually left the playground and back into the village. Though when the fox didn't run from its hiding place, Narumi finally noticed others were around. Just as she started thinking about it, the fox ran into another hiding spot across the road. Narumi followed again. A few more times of this had her realizing the little fox was actually avoiding the sight of the surrounding people. just as she had been doing in the mornings as she secreted to its shirakas. Laughing, Narumi turned it into a game, and started following the fox's example to not be seen. She couldn't help but wonder if all animals acted this way. The chase picked up pace as they entered more and more secluded areas of the village, with less people traversing the streets. Finally they came to a stop just outside a forest. The road they were currently on led to a walled compound, but the fox obviously wouldn't live inside such a place. Nor did it appear to be headed there either. Instead, it ran into the really tall grass. She would be unable to follow it if there hadn't been a thin path made from the small creature flowing through it. Though it got harder and harder to follow as the grass seemed to grow as she moved through it. Well, get taller as she went deeper into the forest. It had been fun before, but now that she could only see the thin spot of parted grass where her furry friend was moving at, she wasn't so sure. Her doubts and frustration increased as it got harder to follow, and the amount of time she'd been following within the forest lengthened. But she kept on. Her friend was leading her somewhere, and she wanted to know. Eventually Narumi could hear the sound of water. Unlike anything she'd heard before, the subtle sound seemed to roar. But it still sounded like water. During her approach, it just seemed to get louder, and her more sure of what it was, but still very confused at how it could be possible. Those doubts cleared up as her wide-eyed gaze moved up the wide falls. It wasn't all that high, but still several times her height. She was startled from the view as soft fuzz rubbed against her leg. Looking down, she smiled at the cute creature. She'd almost come to think of the two foxes as her best friends. It once again led her again, but this time into a patch of flowers, a very large patch, that covered much of the area by the waterfall. It laid down upon them, which she happily copied. For the first time in her life, the red-headed child was completely at ease. She could never remember feeling so relaxed. Her smile, a rarely seen genuine expression, increased when the fur ball curled up against her arm as she shifted to the side to hold the purring creature. The girl didn't even notice her tiredness before falling deeply asleep among the flowers and fluff. Far up in the trees, a black-clad woman gazed down upon her ward, a child shunned by others, a little girl that is being manipulated into hiding her gender for her own safety. A fragile existence that has little in her life to appreciate, and nearly nobody to care for her. Even she hadn't allowed herself to approach the child. Only when the Hokage practically forced the job upon her recently had she even taken an interest. But now that she was a guardian, she was unable to personally interact with the girl. But she was currently in shock. If someone had tried to sneak up on her, they would be able to do so with the simplest ease. Maybe even if they had tried to attack the child below, they might have been capable of doing so. The past couple weeks, she had taken notice of the two foxes that were obviously alternating between days to keep the lonely child company for a few hours each day. Even after reporting the strange occurrence to the Hokage, no orders to take action were given. Though he too found it highly suspicious, there was no indication of foul play. Indeed, there were rumors of the two foxes, and even he had heard of them. Only now had they been spotted by an adult, but only by his ANBU. That in itself was strange. But with the rumor and little evidence of danger, he had merely ordered her to be attentive to the creatures. Today, though, watching as the intelligent Vulpine pull her ward's attention, comfort her lonely soul, then have her follow it through the village while keeping completely hidden from others, it wasn't expertly done, but with her ward following so closely, not a single eye caught sight of the creature, and the few that could had only seen her ward trying to sneak around. Even more, it had led the boyish girl to the forest of the rumors. She watched as the child followed, albeit frustratingly, through the tall grass. Where they stopped, though, she had never seen an area so beautiful. The small river was maybe 3 or 4 meters wide, waterfall was easily 10 meters in height, surrounding trees anywhere from 15 to 30, grass short enough to not be a bother around the waterfront, and several flower beds about the area. Specifically, just under the rock face on either side of the waterfall, at least as wide as the stream itself on either side, and a good few meters long, the assortment of random flowers enhanced the view of beauty to nearly unimaginable levels. A breathtaking sight to say the least, but the fact that one of the foxes led her ward to such a place, showing her the love that should naturally be given to a child. Even if it wasn't human, it had given her more attention and comfort than any other had probably done within the girl's short life. But the real shock came from the smile upon the mistreated child's face. She never seen such a smile from the girl before, almost as if any smile seen before was utterly fake. The ANB watched as the redhead lay there, happily dreaming, hugging the suspicious golden vulpine as it purred their troubles away. Maybe they were fake? That thought would make anyone feel terrible. A shift in the grass brought her attention back to reality. The darkening skies told her that she had actually been there for far longer than she wanted to believe. Had she been so out of it? Her gaze fled back to the moving color within the grass. A bright red, that quickly shaped into the form of the another fox. The blonde stripes that slide from either eye, an inverse coloring of the other fox, told her it was the twin sibling. It was strange how they looked exactly alike, yet inversely colored. It made its way into the field, traversing the flowers towards her ward. Eventually it crawled into a place between the redhead's arms and her tummy. Despite her rank and the requirements of it, she was still young, still a girl, and still enjoyed cuteness. It was simply ingrained into her being, as it was with nearly all females. She cursed not having a camera on hand for such an adorable scene. It would probably keep the old Hokage happy with her for months. Instead, he's going to be upset that there wasn't any evidence of it. Maybe she'd keep quiet? She cursed her mission. Silently fuming, she looked at the scene below as if betrayed by Lady Luck herself. A brush flowed up the canvas. It pulled back for a moment, then slid over it again in another direction. Once more it was pulled away, then another dip, and it flowed once more. This continued for a few moments. Eventually it was simply left within the ink pot. The man sighed heavily. Lately, his job was growing increasingly frustrating. There was so much going on that he didn't know how to handle, let alone wanted to. He stood up, forcing his creaking bones and sore muscles to cooperate. The Uchiha problem wasn't going smoothly at all. His advisors were causing troubles behind his back, nothing too outrageous that he could find, but enough to frustrate him. His wayward students are still running amok, though Jiraiya was at least providing information to alleviate some of it. But his biggest worry was anything but straightforward. Hiruzen moved from his painting to sit down at his desk. He picked up an interesting picture from its face-down position. It may not have been nearly as perfect as he had heard the first instance to be, but it was an image that still melted his heart. Amusingly, he could still feel his ANBU shiver whenever she entered his office to report lately. Her initial reluctance to report was well warranted, but his eyes shifted to the alien creatures within the image. He couldn't place them at all. Never before had he heard of such, but that wasn't all too strange. There are many creatures within this world that he had yet to hear of, let alone see. But that wasn't what worried him. His instincts were set off the moment they had first appeared before the Uzumaki child. He still regretted announcing her connection to the fox. It was avoidable, but he had listened to the fourth's wish. Although that could have been misinterpreted to only those who knew of it, rather than the whole village. With knowledge of her out, it had unintentionally protected her from both the clans and Danzo, but it also put her into a position where he couldn't help her too much either. At least not without serious repercussions. He sighed once more. The two vulpine creatures drew his attention once more. Unique, untrained but can use chakra to traverse, non-aggressive, and only show themselves to children. Aside from the single ANBU guard of Narumi. Rumors of them started up a few months after the changes the Senju clan grounds started showing. Were they a result of such, or part of the reason? Was there even a connection? He had even almost forgotten about the presence himself until the forest came back up. It was now a constant within the village, day or night. It was there, slightly comforting, as if wrapping people up in a thin blanket. Oddly, he thought these two might have something to do with it, but pushed the thought away. They were unique, and reports from Nico stated they felt strong, but weren't letting off the waves of chakra that would be needed to cause such a constance within the village. He had actually sent several patrols to find these creatures several times, especially after their existence had been confirmed by Nico. But once again, not a single sighting of the creatures were to be had. They were capable of hiding from even his best trackers. Their scent was around the entire forest, and seemingly stuck together for some strange reason, throwing off any trails. The Aburame all but refused to go near the forest anymore, as their Kikaichu tend to refuse returning to their hosts. The Hyuga simply don't care, and those he had under his command came out without results. Either the two were capable censors, or masters of going unnoticed. Probably both, if they could use chakra as reports from Nico stated. Hearing of untrained animals capable of walking up trees was almost dumbfounding. It requires training just to use chakra, let alone knowing how it can be used. Either they had someone training them, or had incredible instincts. The only reports Hiruzen had of people entering or exiting the forest was when children got curious or adults went looking for the rumored creatures. Not a single person looked like they had any connection, even when he had his ANBU investigate those who repeatedly entered the grounds. He could have them arrested, but soon enough the growing interest had vanished when the area became too much trouble to easily traverse for civilians. Children still tried though, and there were still a few who claimed to find the foxes, but for Narumi to come across them, especially when they came to her, was suspicious at best. And yet, no evidence appeared about any hidden plays or possible dangers. The foxes themselves have all but proven they mean no harm. He just wished that the only one under his command to find the creatures wasn't Narumi's guard. Having Nico capture the creatures in front of Narumi would be counterproductive in many ways. He'd had a second guard for that purpose once a few days before, but neither fox appeared, and it had left Narumi depressed. That wasn't going to be repeated. Hiruzen laid the picture down, taking one last glance at it. It was a treasure. Just as he had described to him before, Narumi laid upon the flower field near the waterfall, with two small inversely colored blonde and red foxes cuddled up against her. The smile on her face was even there, but nowhere near as angelic as been described to him. Narumi's second visit to the area had been of her own accord, and a near repeat of the first, but had taken the enamored girl several times longer to find the waterfall, which left her exhausted instead of simply tired. The differences were apparent, and he wished he could have an image of her first time instead, but was content with this version. Hearing the door open ended his reminiscence. It was the reason he ended his painting and laid the picture down. Gigi, Naruchan, it's been a while since your last visit. How have you been lately? He smiled grandfatherly as the girl ran around the desk to hug him. Amen. It's great. I even made a new friends. She released him as her smile brightened. Oh? This is a first. Who might they be? Ah? The elderly man watched her blinking in confusion, almost wondering about the reason. I don't know their names? That's odd. Friends usually have a name. Hiruzen could almost laugh as he asked his question, but held it in. Narumi pouted. I can't? They can't talk. Databane, I see. Well, there's usually other ways you can ask, or for them to tell. Hiruzen held in his laughter, and watched as her pout deepened. But they're cats. How do I ask a cat its name? I want to know, the old man chuckled. He wanted to correct her, but couldn't find it in himself to do so. It wouldn't just give away her guard, but was too cute. Her naive notion that she might be able to ask an animal its name was humorous as well. Still, he knew that some animals were intelligent, and quite capable of doing so, and if they were capable, he'd like to know as well. Did you try just asking? If they can't give you a name, or don't have one, you can simply name them yourself. Maybe I could even meet them sometime. Narumi's eyes brightened at the notion. Okay. Thanks, Gigi. I wanted to let you know that the academy starts next week. I figured you'd like to meet some children your own age. Maybe even make some friends. It's also where the Yondaime learned to be a ninja. Really? Friends. I can learn like the Yondaime did? I love when you tell me about him. Can you tell me another story? Please. Hiruzen chuckled again at her restless probing. She would keep asking questions for hours when he started talking about ninja. He was just glad it was mostly about the fourth Hokage, though sometimes he wished the girl would inquire about his own tales. Well, let's start with. Haruna huffed as she pulled a pot of water onto the fire to be heated, then she moved the stool over to where the chopping board was and started slicing vegetables. She was enjoying seeing how her favorite food was made, and preparing it herself. Ji-san had said she was almost ready to start helping to make it, and she was focusing on all the aspects needed to do so. Haruna had already started, so she was being left behind. Though that might have been caused by her rushing lately, causing improper balance within the meal. Basically, her rush had put her from being better than her sister to being worse. Even though they were both told at nearly the same time, a single day apart, she had been told first, and her failure had been relayed to her sister, keeping her from making the same mistake. The violet-eyed girl sighed at the possibilities of ramen she could learn to make and possible create. Though she didn't need to eat, it was still a pleasure. It didn't matter if it brought bathroom needs into the equation, the experience was too delicious to pass up. But it had been a while since she enjoyed a bowl. Her thoughts were broken with the voice of her sensei. Our special customer has arrived. Widened eyes took off to hurry the process. She had been daydreaming. It was too early to be doing that, especially with a sister to feed. Back and forth, her hands flew as she fished out the rest of the ingredients needed and prepared them for Tucci to use. First bowl, second, she needed more. Her little feet took her across the room and back. A third, fourth, and fifth bowl's worth of ingredients quickly found its way to be sliced, diced, heated, and prepared. Fixing enough for a single bowl at a time was too much effort, so ingredients were usually laid out for several. Haruna heard Sensei call out order up from outside, and rushed the last bit dumbly. She watched as Tucci came back into the kitchen, but just as the door started closing behind him, she saw a pair of eyes leaning far over to the side, trying to peek through the small gap. Locking upon one another, both feminine sets widened, unknowingly mirrored by the other, just before getting cut off. Violet's slitted eyes stared at the now closed door. She had been leaning too far over the table as she cut up the last of the vegetables needed for what Tucci called a healthy diet. Usually, she just merely cut the produce calmly, leaving nothing visible to be seen through the door, no matter who looked in. Having someone see her was shocking, even more so when it was her sister. She saw me. Huh, and my ears. Let's just hope she doesn't. She will. She's us. Of course she will. Tucci? Haruna took a deep breath. Tucci-san? He didn't reply, but the turn of his head told her he was listening. Nei-chan just saw my ears. The man stopped at her words for a moment, then nodded understandingly. He knew the twins didn't want to be outed just yet. The girl sighed as the man walked out with another 2 bowls for his usual early morning customer. Narumi's gaze lingered upon the open door. She had pulled herself out of the gaping daze a moment before, but was still in disbelief. Had she seen what she did? Were those really real? And those eyes, those violet-slitted eyes were so similar. And that hair. If she hadn't seen the human face, she'd have thought it was the fox. Watching the door open brought her attention back to the bowls of food. She was hungry, but far less than she had been in recent weeks. It wasn't the starving pang that had tormented her for so long anymore. She could wait a moment. Narumi looked up from the steamy bowl of godly smells. She stopped with a blink as the old man raised a finger to his lips. It was the first time anyone used such a gesture, but she didn't know what it meant, and frowned. Boo, this time he shook his head. Don't worry, you'll meet eventually. Now visibly pouting, the girl returned to the nearly impossible to ignore bowl of angelic deliciousness. Unable to resist any longer, Her desires were soon fulfilled by the twin sticks of deliverance held within her grasp. Her thoughts still lingered on the impossibility. The twins were once more relaxing on their day off when they felt a spark of lonely darkness headed their way. Shifting their gazes up from the flowers, twin slits turned towards each other before nodding. Quickly, they bundled their way towards the usual field, only belatedly feeling the second spark of darkness following the first from high in the trees. It took a few days to actually figure out why the ramen maker warned them not to appear before their sister, but once they had, completely agreed that they wouldn't do so in human form. Not until the follower was gone, at least. When that would be, Ida knew. Springing from their den, specifically made by the waterfall for the sake of ease and closeness, the twins found themselves appearing through a flower bush laid against the rock wall, and into the usual field. They continued from there towards the middle, then proceeded to lay down, as if always there. It took a few minutes more for the slow human sister to come into sight. Her smile brightened as she rushed to them, almost squealing as she picked them up into a hug, much to their dismay. "You're here again." Being held so roughly wasn't by any means pleasant, but they endured. It was an action of her happiness, so they wouldn't struggle. Though they remained annoyed until one was laid back down, and the other held in a far more comfortable position. It was nice that they were small enough to easily rest within a child's arms. The red fox walked onto Narumi's lap as she sat down. Soon the blonde fox was purring within Narumi's arms, having her head stroked gently and lovingly. The one underneath soon echoed the feelings she was perceiving from her sister, both physically and mentally. While not quite distinct, they did feel the other's emotions through the link, swaying their own. "And then I'm going to be starting the academy tomorrow." Despite barely listening, this quickly pulled their attention, startling the two out of their pleasant daze. They looked at one another darkly. "Gigi says I might make some friends." "I've never had one of those, Tebane," Narumi wistfully whispered. "Though, I'd like to think of the two of you as my friends." Her smile returned at that, only to widen when she saw / felt their nods. It was like a large weight drifted off her. Even if they weren't human, they agreed to be friends. The thoughts of the twins were somewhat darker. She won't make any friends. She'll try though. Hopefully that pink-haired girl won't hit her though. I still feel those bumps. Why did she have to hit us just because we tried talking to that emo once? Every single time we even walked nearby too. Maybe she'll meet that blue-haired girl, eh? Yeah. But how can we get them to meet? And he disappears in a flash. A yellow flash. Then somehow reappears somewhere else. Isn't that amazing? I want to be like that. Databane. People would recognize me wherever I go, unable to ignore me anymore. Maybe I could even become Hokage too? Then they'd have to stop ignoring me. She wants to do that too. Yeah. Maybe we can help her do it. But then, he was like, can't you just ask them? But you two don't speak. So I don't know what to call you. If only I could speak fox, Tebane. Narumi pouted, frustrated at herself. She blinked, realizing her arms were empty. Looking around, she found that the twin foxes were over by the water. Following the two, she realized they were drawing in the mud. Those are weird pictures. Wait, aren't those words? Like what's on the signs and stuff? Both twins felt like face-palming. It had been so long, they only remembered the most basic words and their own names. They had put down the nicknames that Hinata had given them, thankfully knowing how to draw those, since they were quite common, but still didn't know all that much. But their sister didn't know how to read, something both of them had forgotten they had only learned in the academy. They flinched when a spike of anger rolled over them from far above. Their gazes snapped to the location with wide eyes. Narumi saw this and followed their looks of fear, confused. I don't see anything? The twins shook their heads simultaneously, as if to remove the creeping flash of emotion. It was strange that the follower had reacted like that, but to what? It was strange, no matter how they thought of it. Was it because Narumi didn't know how to read? But wasn't that normal for them? Was it because of something one of them did? Haruna? All three girls jumped at the quiet question. Well, two foxes had their first straighten in fright for a moment, as their faces jerked towards the sound. The human girl actually did jump before turning around. All three came to the sight of a pale-eyed brunette wearing a cute yukata. Hinata finally noticed the differences, as well as the two fox heads that barely poked out above the flowers in her sight. Yeah? I am sorry. She bowed quickly. May I ask who you are? The twins looked at each other in surprise. Maybe there was a god of luck? Because he had just answered their prayers. This was their first friend, and maybe she could be Narumi's? Though they rarely saw each other, not even a handful of times, they had taken a liking to the girl. She was so nice that there wasn't any dark to feel when the girl was alone. Hesitance and worry around others, but not alone. She was the only person that they'd ever had sneak up on them. There was another presence just outside the forest that they felt like was watching them. But the twin foxes dismissed that as paranoia, caused by the sneaky child. It's like she can literally just hide her presence. Narumi just stared at the newcomer. It was a first for her to have someone talking to her like this. The girl wasn't glaring, looking at her weirdly or scared. Every kid she had ever seen was warned to stay away from her. She could even hear parents telling their kids that, or other kids warning their friends of what their parents said. No hint of anger or disgust. No show of laughing at her. No jokes or lies. She wasn't doing anything that made her feel uneasy. Really, she wasn't doing much of anything. She was simply waiting for a reply. Ayano? My name is Uzumaki Naruto. The girl replied, still stunned, though a bit hopeful at not garnering a negative reply with her name. Such a simple response, to those who didn't recognize her, was practically taboo, if she wanted to be treated normally like everyone else. Not that it happened anymore. When did it actually happen? Hinata paused. Wasn't that the name that ramen chef spoke of? It's a pleasure to meet you, Narumi openly gaped. For the first time in her life. Second? Someone had replied kindly. She was dense, maybe, but she knew the difference. But nobody was kind to her. Wait, wasn't this called formal? She didn't really care. The redhead smiled brightly. You too. Databane, Ano, are YUP playing, eh? Narumi blinked a few times, trying to remember what it was she was doing, then looked at the ground at the written words. I was asking their names? But I can't read. Hinata's eyebrows pulled together. Why couldn't she read? Shouldn't that have been taught years ago? Though it was a long process, Hinata could read almost everything around her. So could Niji. Wasn't it needed for the academy? She had heard that even orphans were taught by the matron, and if Naruto was an orphan like the twins, then shouldn't he have been taught? Looking down at the ground, Hinata found the name she gave the fox girls. Haruna. Fiona, eh? Are those your names? Narumi looked down at her newfound friends, which nodded happily. Wow. You're amazing, Hinata-chan. CH-chan? Her face flushed at the suffix. Amen. Thank you. I wouldn't have found out if you hadn't come by. Narumi smiled brightly, ignoring the glowing blush of the brunette. And there she goes again. I remember her doing this before. Ah, yeah. Now I remember her. She was always passing out for the strangest reasons. And down she goes, said Hyuga, quickly descended into the soft grass, unconscious. Narumi blinked owlishly, confused at the sudden disappearance of the girl as she opened her eyes from the large smile. Her gaze drifted to find the fallen body. Eh? Hinata! Are you okay? What happened? Hello? Don't die on me. Wake up. Please wake up. Laughing inwardly at their prediction, the two foxes patted their way around to the unconscious girl's cheek, licking either side, ignoring their panicked, almost teary, sister. Soon enough the girl had awoken due to the twins' efforts, calming the crying and frantic redhead, and leaving a flustered brunette. Far above, a masked ANBU watched on at the interactions. She was ready to step in instantly when the Hyuga heiress suddenly collapsed, but when the fox kits moved, she forcefully stopped herself. She also knew of the Hyuga guard outside the forest watching in. Despite the forest obscuring much of the chakra presence, it was still visible to her senses. If he hadn't moved either, then it probably wasn't too dangerous. No doubt the guard was watching intently. After realizing the girl was fine, she could safely say watching the children's antics was humorous to say the least. Passing out from being thanked, and awakening to animals licking her face was probably terribly embarrassing. Still, she could just feel the foxes were powerful. There wasn't a chakra presence from them to signify so, but her instincts were telling her that was false. They felt of the forest itself. Even training ground 44 didn't have such presence anymore. And the feeling was spread around the whole of Konoha. It wasn't bad, but still left her uncomfortable knowing about it. Unlike others, having been within the forest for a time, she realized the comforting presence was actually related to the forest. Most hadn't spent more than an hour or two within, unlike herself, and for the foxes to feel nearly exactly as the forest does, she truly felt that they were dangerous if provoked. Yet neither showed any action more than playfulness or comfort. Still, their having such an existence next to her ward so often, so close, was not enjoyable to say the least. Hiruzen watched as one of his ANBU made entrance, Nico reporting in. She continued at her leader's nod. Inu made contact, and the shift was successful. She took a deep breath. A while later, the elderly man sat alone. The weathered Hokage let out a weary sigh. If Nico's report was to be believed, then he at least had answers to many of his questions. In doing so, far more had easily come to replace them. Worse yet, he had accidentally stunted the Uzumaki girl's knowledge and growth. That fact alone made him feel every year he had lived, Narumi may have had a caretaker to provide her basic needs, an ANBU from his force to ensure the girl's constant safety for her first 6 years of life, but he had neglected to have her teach the more advanced skills a child needs to learn. He realized protocol dictated she refrain from being cited unless needed. The ANBU likely took care of the girl's needs in secret. Had he not been forced with so many various difficulties following the QB attack, such a lack in basic oversight wouldn't have occurred. That was not his intention, but thinking back, is often indirectly stated within the reports. He could only fault himself if this is true. He had, again, failed his duty. The rest of the report was just as disturbing. If correct, the presence, a supposedly calming entity that had continually kept him on edge, was supposedly the forest itself. According to Nico, she only realized it after being there long enough to notice with the fox siblings nearby. They had some connection to it as well, probably as either the source of the presence, while the forest spread it. She stated that there was a slight shift to it according to how the foxes themselves were acting. It made sense, really? But he couldn't figure out why. Had the Kyuubi's chakra been involved somehow? It didn't matter. But now he knew how they were avoiding people. Empaths, they could feel emotions. That was not a sensory type that was easily avoided. He doubted that even Root and Bu could avoid such a skill, despite their training. Worse yet, they were intelligent. Enough to not only understand language, but read and write at least basic structure, something that had apparently been neglected from Narumi's preparation for the academy. More than that, if truly as intelligent as stated, they would easily spot a normal trap laid out to them, and if they were practically a part of the forest, as Nico believes, then there was little, if anything, that could be used to ensnare them. Nico couldn't even feel char emanating from either one, just that they felt like the forest itself, giving more credibility to the theory. His only comfort was the fact that they were peaceful. If the presence he had felt lately was any indication, then they really were simply playing with the kids, and avoiding everyone else. Even more, they were pulling the two most emotionally harmed children into their comfort. Nico had said that the closer she was to the foxes inside the forest, the calmer she felt. Though that backfired, removing any ease that settled, for that very reason. But if the fox siblings were indeed empaths, then maybe they really had traversed the village to seek out Narumi, as he initially believed. Just for a different reason. If they felt a child in pain through their empathic ability, then they might want to approach said child in attempt to help. They could use their presence to comfort the lonely child. Of course, this was all theory, a completely unlikely scenario, but it was the only one that fit so far. Unfortunately, he couldn't ask the only possible outside source without cause. Hyuga Hinata was the heiress to the clan, and too politically important to simply approach. From the report, there was not a just cause to question the child. From every visible aspect, everything indicates the two as peaceful. So much that they are actually spreading it to the whole of Konoha. Whether intentional or not is unknown, but still cause for worry. The issue is whether it's the forest itself spreading the influence, or the fox siblings themselves. If they were releasing such masses of chakra to do so, Konoha, he, should have felt it long ago. But if the forest was, or maybe the forest was amplifying what the foxes were putting out. But they felt like the forest, not the other way around. There were far too many unknowns for his liking. Narumi sat in the near-empty classroom, anxiously waiting. As per usual, she enjoyed her morning ramen. Lately it had started changing, but tasted amazing anyways. She couldn't figure it out, but her body felt a little better too. It wasn't just easier to move around, but she felt quicker, lighter, and her body could bend better, like taking off some thick clothes or something. Her eyes roamed towards the door as another to-be student walked in. Short brown hair, normal clothes, taller than her, but bland. His eyes went to her, and she could just feel the annoyance in his demeanor as he realized who she was. Another kid that was told mean things about her. Sighing, she let her head hit the destination. Was it really too much to ask for a single person to not take offense by her very presence? Everywhere she goes, someone is always saying something about her, and keeping the others away. Even things she didn't really do. The sounds of footsteps drew her attention again. Black hair shaped kind of duck, but like what kind of hairstyle is that? Did he like ducks? Black turtleneck, white shorts and the police emblem? Weird. Eep. I'm sorry. Narumi's gaze snapped to the voice. Another brown-haired boy walked in, followed by Hinata. She waved, smiling, hoping to get her attention. Hearing a sound next to her, she paused. Looking towards her side, she found Duck Hair sitting next to her. She looked left. A window. Right, left, no empty seat. Her head hit the table again. Hey, doesn't that hurt? Narumi's gaze turned towards the side as she lifted her head. The police boy was looking at her concerned. "Men, I'm fine. Why are you talking to me? Why wouldn't I?" Now she was really confused. Shouldn't your mother have told you to stay away, or something? She watched as the confused boy looked at her as if she was crazy. No, it was simple, but had built up some hope, and she visibly brightened. My name's Uzumaki Naruto. What's yours? Again, he looked at her as if she was crazy. Mine? How do you not know that? Narumi blinked olishly, then frowned. Because I don't? And I don't really want to call you Duckhead or something. Duckhead? Huh, your hair, it looks like a duck's butt, Tebane. I was thinking maybe you like ducks or some. It does not. Duckbutt cried out. But Narumi tried. Shut up. Yeah. Leave him alone. Looking around, the redhead suddenly found herself surrounded by girls. Don't talk to Sasuke-sama. You shouldn't even be here. Mama said he's evil. Stay away from him. Get away from Sasuke-sama. The more it went on, the more Narumi wanted to simply disappear. More and more slowly joined in, until she finally jumped on the desk and tried running out the door. Unfortunately, that was stopped as she plowed into a wall. My, what do we have here? Already trying to skip class? Well, maybe we can find a suitable punishment. Despite the soft-spoken words, Narumi found the woman's voice scary. She shivered at the glare. A few moments later, the emotional child was standing out in the hall holding a bucket of water in each hand, unable to hear what was going on inside the room. Still, she didn't let her tears fall, no matter how much they tried. Any sign of her yet? No, I wonder where she is? The classes let out hours ago. I've been waiting by her apartment, but nobody is here. Well, her follower appeared earlier, and is still here. I'm going to go inside. Eh? Shadow wasn't watching her during class? No, she wasn't. I'm going in to get her now. Be safe. A red-furred fox carefully slipped out of the bush. The evening light was plenty for her to see as she slipped through the shadows. Her stealth skills had come along incredibly recently, enhancing upon her evasion skills from before the incident. Quickly, the girl found her way to a still-open window, and walked through it. The empty classroom was filled with unique scents, but not one pertained to her target. Padding to the door, she realized that it wouldn't be easy to open, if at all, in her current shape. Quickly the fox shifted to her human form, turned the handle, and disappeared back into fur. Haruna nosed her way through the small gap, and kept on sniffing until finding the correct scent. A few moments later had her staring at a trembling redhead, holding 2 buckets that were sloshing water out from the jerky shakes. Tears were flowing down her face, openly displaying her obvious pain. Oh no. What? Bucket torture. What? Already? We're going to Ichiraku. Meet us there. Narumi continued as told all day long. She held on, taking the punishment with her head held high. It didn't stop the taunts or jokes at her expense. A few had even tried pushing her over, hoping to get the buckets to spill. She knew that would get her in even more trouble. But when class let out, the teacher told her to do it until dark. Only then could she leave. A sudden fuzz against her leg shocked her to attention. Narumi looked down at the red bundle as it wormed its way around her legs. Haruna? It looked up and nodded. I'll come with you in a while. I have to stay in Fini. Hearing a growl, the redhead jumped, spilling some water, shocked at her fox friend's attitude. She was growling. But I can't. The sound only got louder, which started scaring her. Oh, okay, we'll go. I just need tea to empty the essay. Narumi set one down and went to toss the water, then did the other, and put the buckets up. Never before had her arms felt so dead to her. They were more wiggly than jello. Tentatively, she followed the little fox out of the building, opening doors for using her back and legs instead of arms. Only when she got near the smell of heaven did she take notice of her path. Eyes alit with joy, her soreness practically disappeared as she ran ahead. Ji-san, ho-ho, come back for a second time today, have you? How was your first day of the academy? The dead tired child almost didn't notice the fox hop upon her lap as she proceeded to fill him in on Duck Up Boy, the girl gang, and evil buckets. Her surprising happiness at such a terrible day put a frown upon the old man's face. He could almost believe she really was happy. Or maybe it was because of him, and the ramen, though her appearance did explain why Fiona had returned. He wanted to tell her that was wrong, but by now he was sure she really was happy. Apparently just being there was enough for her, as sad as that thought was. He unfortunately stayed quiet about it, and allowed her to talk. Tucci didn't want to spoil her improving mood. Despite her happy demeanor, it didn't rub off. This was not a pleasant night for the chef, as displayed by the stiff smile. Pink-slitted eyes watched as a tuft of red was, once more, heading out the doorway of a classroom. She's out. Again. This makes 2 entire weeks, longer than ours. I wonder what's different. What can we do, though? She can't learn if nobody is willing to help. We can help, but how? We can't force the teacher to do anything. We can't even show ourselves. People try to chase us every time we're seen. And our human form is even worse. Who knows what would happen if they find the 2 of us not going to the academy? Force us to go. Yeah, but what if they ask questions? Or take us for an examination? Who knows what else? Terrible things? Quit that. We can teach ourselves. How? Most everything we learned was a lie. Most but not all. We know a little bit of reading, right? Yeah, but not enough. We'd have to go to the library or something. Exactly. The library. Bad idea, but it's all we have. I'm going to get her out of the hall. See if you can get something from the library that can help us to read. Ask if Ji-san can help. Jumping from branch to branch, a tuft of blonde descended to the ground, before shooting off towards an open window. She didn't care that the room was filled, just jumped through anyways. The open door was her aim, shooting through the window. Her aim proved true, landing her against the wall outside the door. Her second leap had her headed towards her sister and back on the floor. Fiona ignored the surprised shouts from behind, stopping behind her sister, who was filling buckets of water again. Unimaginative teacher, maybe, but definitely a painful punishment, and growled. Water splashed everywhere as the redhead whirled around. Narumi sprinted off, an insanely happy sister following her already. It didn't take long before the pair slipped through the streets, the fox child staying hidden, and towards the ramen stand. It would obviously be empty soon, but they didn't chance it. Fiona led her into the back door of the building. Ji-san, is it going to pick up soon? No, it's going to be another quiet day. Why? Nei-chan is coming. She doesn't have to help out today. One of you is more than enough, the other Nei-chan. Tucci turned towards his little helper with a raised brow. Isn't she in class? Haruna looked downtrodden. They kicked her out again. Fiona is bringing her here. We wanted to know if you could tell us a good book to learn reading? Tucci's features unnaturally hardened. I thought I told you both not to approach her, eh? But her follower's shadow doesn't watch her at the academy. She'll be coming alone instead. The ramen chef was still disgruntled, but left it at that. So long as they were being careful. He just hoped it would turn out okay. Have her back before the last hour of academy, just to be safe. Haruna smiled widely. Hi, and get a dictionary. Go to a bookstore, not a library. I'll help you with the basic hiragana and katakana if you need it. From there, the dictionary should show you the rest. He walked out the door with a steaming bowl. Haruna hurried towards the other door and hurriedly opened it just in time, forgetting to say her thanks in the process. Hurry in! 2 blurs flew through the door before it shut. The blonde watched as the redhead giggled, finally catching her sister. She followed suit after seeing the distraught appearance of her fox-shaped sister. It took a moment for both to settle down. Narumi let the struggling fox go before realizing that someone else was in the room, and had been laughing with her. Then the smells hit, and she knew it was Ichiraku's. Only then did she look at the other person, gasping. Why you? Hello, Neichan. Funa waved, unintentionally distracting Narumi from seeing Haruna's shape shift into a human right behind her. You're so cute. Just as she was about to jump forward and hug the strangely familiar girl, somehow comfortable enough to want physical contact, she felt arms wrap around her. Narumi was stiff from the unexpected contact. It was a strange sensation. She had seen others doing this, and had about done it automatically herself. It was almost foreign, with only her Gigi doing it every once in a while. Looking back, she found herself in the similar hugging she had tried to put the other fox-haired girl in, something Narumi was surprisingly completely okay with. Hello, Nei-chan, Narumi furrowed her brows. Why are you calling me that? Who are you? She looked back and forth between the 2 fox sisters, shifting anxiously. The redhead didn't know why, but she didn't want to be rejected by these 2 at all. Not if she could help it. How to explain? Maybe just get it out there. So we're your sisters? Kind of? Maybe, but not quite. We don't actually know, huh? Now even more confused, she picked out the one word that made sense from the weird look-alike girls going back and forth. Sisters? Probably. I have sisters? Narumi breathed out, wide-eyed, watching as the twins they had to be looked between each other again, pulled the hair away from their faces to show something that had only been seen in a mirror before, then nodded. Kaya! She lunged at the sister in front of her, hugging tightly. I have sisters. I really have sisters. Don't forget me, the other followed, finishing the 3-way hug. Narumi found herself snuggled between 2 soft and cozy tails. Of course they were attached to the sisters, as they said, but the tails, they jumped all at once as a distinctly male voice coughed. Shouldn't one of you be headed towards the bookstore? I'll go. I just need money? Where is it? Haruna removed herself, pulled her hood up, and hid her tail. A moment later had her exiting the door, after thanking Tucci profusely for the pocket change. Before they knew it, Funa and Narumi were alone. Tucci was serving another round outside. Okay, so, where to start? Funa tilted her head. My name, I guess? Uzumaki Funa, Tebane. You do that too? Funa blushed. We all do, I guess. I'm Uzumaki Narumi. Where'd Funa go? Funa's face seemingly turned into a tomato as she remembered her earlier plight.